Good afternoon, everyone. It's one of those occasions where I hate to interrupt conversation. It's just wonderful to see everyone here and enjoying each other's company as we begin this first meeting of the Pumped Storage Advisory Committee. So I'll call this meeting to order at 5 o'clock. And we'll begin with a moment of reflection. Please just join me for a moment as we reflect on the business of the day. Thank you. And I just wanted to share that I'm here in the chair's position just for today as we go through our training and the business that we have before us this afternoon. One of the first agenda items on our next meeting will be to elect a chair and a vice chair. So you'll just have to put up with me here for today. I'm going to read the land acknowledgement. We would like to begin by acknowledging that we are meeting on the traditional lands and treaty territory of the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, which includes the Chippewas of Nawash Unceded First Nation and the Chippewas of Saugeen First Nation. We also recognize the Métis whose ancestors shared this land and these waters. We extend our gratitude to all Anishinaabe and Métis peoples and their descendants, past, present, and future, who continue to care for and inhabit these lands and tend these waters. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest around the table? And please recognize everyone that you can declare that at any point in time. And if anyone isn't sure what that means, please raise your hand and let me know. But if there's any matter that comes forward that you feel you have a conflict with, we just ask you to raise your hand and to share the reason that you feel you have a conflict. So if that ever arises, don't hesitate to announce that. At this point in time, I'm going to call upon Mayor Ross Kentner to give a few remarks. And after that, we'll do just a short roundtable introduction of each one of us. I think most of you know each other, but just in case for any we don't, we'll do those introductions. So over to you, Mayor Kentner.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keaveney. I just have a few words this evening, but I assure you they are heartfelt. On behalf of Council and all residents of the municipality of Meaford, thank you for rising to this occasion. We are faced with arguably the most important decision in the 150-year history of our community. You have committed your time, your experience in many areas, from local knowledge to environmental concerns to business acumen, your youthful concern for the future generations. And most importantly, all of you have committed to respectful consensus building. You've taken on the challenge of finding the answers to the many questions in the public mind and of giving good counsel, spelt with an S, to your municipal council, spelt with a C. So thank you for your service. As well as getting acquainted tonight, you're going to receive some important training. I've had this training and it is important and it's also very interesting and you'll appreciate it, I'm sure. So I am going to excuse myself shortly. I want to also tell you that there is more training coming, which I and members of council will be sharing with you because there is a lot that we have to learn, I think, to do the best job that lies before us. Council became a willing host in order to engage in development of a regulatory plan and related information gathering and disclosure requirements to address the central role and future actions of this municipality over the life cycle of the project from the planning stage to decommissioning. So this committee is a critical next step. And again, thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor Kentner. Well said, and I certainly echo all of your statements this afternoon. And I just want, before we go into the introduction process, I just want to say exactly what Ross said, how happy I am that you were all here. Matt and I and Kirsten and Julia went through the interviewing process, and it was not easy. We had so many candidates who would have been good fits for this committee, and I congratulate all of you for being here with us today. So we'll carry forward then with some short introductions, and I think we'll start with you, Dave, if we may, to just come around this way and just tell us who you are and just a little bit about if you're happy to be here or just what you do for a living or what you think, whatever you'd like to share. Sorry, Matt.
Sorry, can I interrupt briefly? Because I figured we should probably do a technical briefing. We are live streaming these meetings, so in order for the live stream to work, we do have to use the microphones. So as you come around, there's a grey button on the panel in front of you. If you just hit that, you'll see the red light come on, and then you will be heard well. Once you're done, if you hit the grey button again, the red light will go off, and we can't have too many of them turned on at once, so we do have to turn them on and off together. Thank you.
So I'm Dave Richardson. I'm the managing family member of Cliff Richardson Boats, fourth generation in the boat business in Meaford. Keen interest in this subject, and I'm really interested in being here. You know, I want to know what's going on and try and be helpful. I've been on one previous municipal committee to do with the sewage treatment plant, and I enjoyed it and found I got a lot of information, so I hope I can bring something to the table. I do have to probably say that our company works at arm's length with TC Energy. And if anybody has a problem with that, the TC Energy have contracted a fish tug that we do work on. And I just want to put that on the table so nobody feels that I'm hiding anything.
We appreciate that, Dave.
Yep.
Thank you for sharing that.
Okay. Other than that, live in Meaford, have lived in Meaford all my life. I'm a graduate of Ryerson Polytechnical, which I guess is probably not a popular name anymore, but my wife works in the town too. She's a nurse in a doctor's office. Family's here as well, grandchildren and my daughter, son-in-law. I guess that's me in a nutshell.
In a nutshell. Thank you, Dave. Lindy.
Hello, my name's Lindy Kingston. I am the youth representative for this committee, and I'm really excited to represent what the young people think here in Meaford and try and put forward a good voice, especially the students here and even people as young as my brother, who's 12. I hope to be a good representative for them. I'm a student at St. Mary's High School, and I also work here in Meaford, and yeah, I'm just really excited to see what I can do and put forward a good voice. I've lived in Meaford my entire life. My grandfather lived on the base and his whole family grew up there, and both my dad and my uncle, my entire family are here now. And I really hope that I can kind of use the knowledge of this town to really put forward a good voice and opinion. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Lindy. And may I say we're especially privileged and excited that you were here. Thank you. Martin.
Thank you. My name is Martin Hedderich. I'm semi-retired, which means I'm working only 40 hours now instead of 80. I own a company called Northern Stove and Fireplace. I'm from Barrie. I moved to Meaford in 2018 when I built a new house for my retirement up in the Bognor Highlands. I'm still in the stove and fireplace business. It seems to be that I can't get out of it. It follows me around. So I'm doing this year for the 40th year in this business. I'm also a lifelong boater and enjoy a boat. I still have a boat in Owen Sound in the marina. And I love to boat and dive on Georgian Bay. So I have a very close relationship to the bay. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Doug.
Hi, I'm Doug Haslam. I am mostly retired. but a full-time resident of Meaford. Moved here permanently in 2019, just ahead of the wave of people that did that. Spent most of my career in the pet food industry, where I negotiated with large companies on a regular basis. So I'm hoping that experience is helpful here. But I love Meaford. I love being a resident here. I certainly see some problems with this proposal, but I'm excited to hear about them and get Meaford the best deal we can get.
Thank you. Harley.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Keaveney. A native of St. Vincent Township, both the Deputy Mayor and I have fond memories of growing up in St. Vincent. My great-grandparents moved here in the 1850s. There's some debate whether it was 54 or 57 or 58, but anyway, everything I've read refers to the 1850s. Settled up at what was then a little village called Morley, which was located on the town line between the former St. Vincent and Sydenham. I want to echo the mayor and the deputy mayor's comments. Thank you folks so much for taking the time and the effort to volunteer for this committee. It's going to be immensely interesting, going to be a journey of discovery, I feel, and hopefully at the end of the day, we can arrive at some conclusions that will be in the very best interests for everyone in our fine municipality. Thanks, Shirley.
Thanks, Harley. And everyone knows I'm Shirley Keaveney, your deputy mayor. Very, very pleased to be here. I'm a fourth generation Meafordite. Similar to Harley's family, my great-grandfather Job came to Canada and farmed up the third line. And my grandfather and father continued to farm. And but most of you will know me as DQ Sherrill. I spent 43 years in the Dairy Queen business and retired because I just loved politics so much. I wanted to devote all of my time to that. But I'm again really, really pleased to be here and looking forward to the work of this committee. Howard.
Hi, I'm Howard Fletcher. I'm an engineering technologist by background, but my entire career was in public safety, both initially with the RCMP and then followed by CSIS. I'm originally from BC, actually. My career took me to Ottawa and then finally to Toronto, where I retired at the executive level with CSIS. Eventually, well, in 2013, I retired to Annan. Quite a change for me. I've been thoroughly enjoyed being a part of this community, and I'm really looking forward to working with all of you to see how this plays out and make sure we do the best we can for all the citizens of Meaford.
Thank you. Ginny.
Hi, I'm Ginny Ellis. I'm an accountant by day and a local resident as well. My ancestors have been here probably since the early 1800s, so been around a long time. I currently live in the impact zone, so this project is of utmost importance to me. And part-time gardener as well. So.
Thank you. Bob.
Yes, thank you. My name is Bob Baranski. I have been a property owner in Meaford for about 40 years. And I have been involved in as the owner of several businesses in my lifetime. I'm semi-retired right now. I'm down to one business. So it's a part-time job most of the time. There are a lot of different views and different people around the table. And I think that by being cooperative and working together, that's why I'm here. Try to make sure that the pump storage project, when it's all finished and done, that the people of Meaford have gotten the very best experience they can and the very best financial situation they can. Thank you.
Thank you. Adam.
Evening, my name is Adam Vaughn. Other than a brief stint down in Hamilton, I've spent all my life here in Meaford. I worked over a decade up at the military base. I've hunted the lands and fished the waters that this is all going to affect. So it's of importance to me. My family's been here well over 100 years. We had 350 acres on the military base before it became such. So again, I'm tied to this project in a lot of different ways. So I'm just looking to make sure that, again, Meaford gets the best deal out of this.
Thank you. And just in case anybody's counted heads, yes, we are missing one. Bob Peel, who is president of the Chamber of Commerce, is hopefully listening in, but Bob is away out west at the moment, but I know he'll be at our next meeting. And just, I think everyone knows Matt, but Matt Smith is our interim CAO and will be participating certainly in the meeting. And welcome and thank you to all of our audience as well for being present and for any of those who are listening in. We'll move forward now with items for consideration next on our agenda. And first of all is the committee terms of reference overview. And Matt's going to take us through that.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yes, I think everybody probably knows me. I'm Matt Smith. I'm the interim CAO until next week when we will have a new person sit in this seat, but I'm also the clerk for the municipality and so involved in committees and things on that sense. You will be able to tell that my family did not arrive here 4 generations ago. I am a 7-year resident of the Meaford area and very happy to be here working with you all and grateful for you being here. My plan is not to go through this terms of reference line by line. I think council's had many conversations about this, and I know some of you have had input into that. And I'm sure that you have all read through this as part of the agenda. But what I do plan to do is just go through the mandate section, section E, because I think that's really sort of the practical reasons why we're here. Quite a bit of the rest of it is some technical stuff about how we'll have meetings and when we'll have meetings and all that sort of stuff. But I think this section is really important, and certainly this is really what, from my point of view, has been the driving force of establishing this committee, is to have the conversations that this section outlines. So we start off here, line 1 of that, which deliberately is the first line here, which is to engage with, inform and listen to the community of Meaford. I think this is a committee that has got a wonderful opportunity to hear from our community, to really bring lots of perspectives that you all bring yourselves, but also from your friends and neighbours and family, and so that we, as the municipality and as council and as this committee, can hear from all sides of this. And the second part of that is then the second line, which is to facilitate community engagement and provide a platform for public input. Now, at all of our meetings, they will be public meetings. There will be an opportunity at all future meetings for the public to make presentations or comment on things on the agenda. So that's a platform for public input, but I think we as a municipal team certainly see the members of this committee as having a potential role in other types of engagement activities as we go through this process and have opportunities to put on perhaps public houses, open houses and so on to get more input from residents. I think one of the things that I'm particularly strong on is that we want to promote openness and communication between the municipality, TC Energy and the community. Several of you have mentioned this already, you know, that whatever happens with this project, we want to make sure it is the best for the community. And the only way that we can do that is by having the information that we need in order to help guide the process. And that leads to contributing to the development of strategies to maximize local benefits. I think you're all aware that there is a clause in council's resolution that requires what's called a community benefit agreement with TC Energy should the project go ahead. That is something that as we get through this process, I see this committee as having a really key role in, again, representing what the community feels could be benefits and should be benefits, and helping council really sort of make some comments and negotiate that with TC Energy. That's a good point to say that we have a company called Strategy Core who are working with us on community benefits. Right now, they are working to negotiate what we call capacity funding. So things like for our time, for the costs of the meetings and all that sort of stuff. And over time, as and when the project moves further forward, they'll be involved in helping us negotiate the best possible community benefit deal. They won't be at these committee meetings regularly, but they will be here when at the right times during the process to get your input and to give you updates on how that is moving along. Item number 5 in the mandate is to gather technical and social research on pumped energy storage facilities. And I think in many ways, this will probably be the backbone of what this committee is doing on a month-to-month basis. We want to have the opportunity where we as a municipality, you as a committee, and by extension, the community can review the research that we assume that TC Energy are doing on this project, but also look at environmental assessment studies and try and answer as many questions as we possibly can for the community. So we'll hear from technical experts, sometimes reviewing for the studies that TC Energy have done, and sometimes just because you as a committee have asked to hear from an expert on a particular subject that's related to the project. To my right-hand side is our project team from Ainley Group, the engineering company. We have Becky Smith, Norman Sandberg, and Paul Austin, all of whom have significant experience working with these kinds of projects. And they will be our primary leads in organizing a lot of that technical background. They aren't necessarily the technical engineers who will do the review, but they will be the people working with us to make sure that we get the best possible independent review and bringing that forward to this committee. And then finally, to provide recommendations to the CAO and council with respect to comments, concerns, areas of interest identified by the community to learn more about the proposed pumped energy storage facility. And I think this is a vital role. Obviously, this is not a decision-making group. Council is the organisation that's elected by the population to make decisions on behalf of the community. But council is very keen, I know, to hear from you as a group on what the concerns are, what the issues are, what the potential benefits are, to help make the decisions that will have to be made on an ongoing basis during this project. So I think there's a wide variety of bits to that mandate, but all coming together with hopefully building our knowledge, working with our community and providing that input to council. And certainly Kirsten Higginson and I, who are here, and a number of other municipal staff will be here at various times, are eager to work with you to try and help along that path. And hopefully we can have a good process together. I'm very happy to take any other questions about the terms of reference, not necessarily just about the mandate, if anybody has anything they're not sure about. But otherwise, we have far more interesting people to hear from than me today.
Adam, go ahead.
Section I references creating reports for council. Who's creating those reports? Are we leveraging staff to make those reports? Who is organizing all that?
Generally, it will be through the municipal staff that are here. We have committed to council that we will take at least a quarterly update to council with information on what's happening in the project from the municipal staff point of view, but also from the committee. The council representatives on the committee, who I should remind everybody are non-voting for the purposes of this committee, will take verbal reports back to council after every meeting. But certainly if there are things that this committee wants to move forward, one of Kirsten's roles, and by extension mine, is to put all of that together for the committee, and sometimes that will come back to you for review before it goes to council. Sometimes it will just take your information and go to council.
Are there any other questions for Matt? Okay, thank you very much, Matt, for that overview.
I am going to slide off to the side so you don't all have to look at me while Nigel is talking behind me, but I'll be back a little while later.
Thank you, Matt. We're going to move forward then with how to run a meeting training, and we welcome Nigel Belchamber, who is going to either come to Matt's chair or to the podium and take us through what Matt promised to be a very interesting and exciting presentation.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. And in fact, if it's an exciting presentation, probably I won't have done it right. Okay, because meeting rules are often, can be among the most boring things that there are. Just because the purpose of meeting rules is actually to make things run smoothly in the background. Nevertheless, thank you very much for asking me to help you with this. The major goal that I have is to provide you with some background, some information, and where you can look in order to disagree agreeably if you have to.
how to disagree agreeably. Think about that. For the most part, your objective is to build consensus. I think we heard that. However, there will be times when you disagree, and you're going to have to learn how to disagree in an agreeable fashion if you're going to continue to work together. Similarly, you're going to hear from some individuals in your public engagement role who will have very passionate opinions and perhaps not agree with the direction that the council or the committee appears to be going. You'll have to learn how to disagree with them in an agreeable fashion, or allow them to disagree with you agreeably as well. And that's the purpose of having rules. I'll tell you a little bit about my background. I've been involved in municipal government for, I hesitate to tell people how many decades, since the last century, the last millennium, somebody said the other day. But actually my municipal career started in the 1970s. I've been a municipal clerk. I've been a municipal treasurer. I've been a municipal CAO. I've worked for myself doing training and with another colleague for pretty well the last 20 years. So I've been involved in quite a number of things. I've done some work in accounting standards. You mentioned you were an accountant. I chaired the public sector accounting board at one time. It was an interesting time dealing with municipal standards. And I've also had an opportunity to teach at the college level and university level in municipal financial management. So I've dealt with, and that's usually municipal staff, senior municipal staff. So I've had occasion to interact with municipal governments in many different ways over the years. So I've had a lot of chance. My colleague and I, who deal with the municipal meeting training, we counted them up one day, and we think I calculated I'd been to about 1,000 municipal meetings, and that was some years ago. So you get a sense of what they might call the good and the bad and the ugly. I know that was the name of a movie, but there's some of each of those. Norm, I think you've seen some of those in your career. So anyway, I want to talk to you about meeting procedures and best practices. And I presume this is the slide advance. So let me see which one works. That's it. Okay. Meeting rules and their origins. That's an interesting font that gets changed, but should be able to, I can see this copy. I hope everybody else can see the copy. I'm going to talk about both rules. I'm going to talk about best practices as well. But I want to talk about where the rules come from in the first place. But the question is, well, why do we need them? Why do we need rules? Why do we need best practices to start with? Every time I go out and drive in heavy traffic, it always amazes me that as many people as there are in heavy traffic succeed. If we're driving down the 401 across the top of Toronto, and that hundreds of thousands of cars a day can proceed without major accidents, quite frankly. Why? Well, because we've got formal rules, the Highway Traffic Act, and we've got some informal rules that we follow too, in terms of polite behavior, when you allow people to get in, when you don't allow people to get in, and so forth. So if you think about driving down the road, it's a form of a meeting, and it's formal and informal rules that you follow. We do it in everything we do. Brian, my colleague Brian back here, he's going to speak to you later. He mentioned he might have to dash out and do some grocery shopping. That's one of the places that we have rules, formal and informal. Think about it. You don't walk out with your groceries without paying for them. At least you're not supposed to, right? That's one of the rules. We have some informal rules. We don't take things out of people's carts. We take it off the shelf and put it in our cart. Our lives are governed by rules, formal and informal. And it's the formal ones that form the basis. And it's the informal ones that allow you to really succeed. So, and the meetings are no different. In fact, all social interaction is governed by one form of rule or another. So just remember that, formal rules and informal rules. Can't resist giving you a little bit of history. Where do the rules come from? Well, Meaford is a government in Canada, and its authority comes from the provincial government, and the provincial government's authority comes from the Canadian Constitution, which came from the British North America Act of 1867. It's a simple, you can trace it back to that. That's where the rules come from for municipal government. Very interesting. And you probably, if you watch the rules or the news recently, you'll see that there's from time to time, there's somebody will pop up and start talking about the Constitution and whether or not they have to follow it and how they follow it. Even using and invoking the notwithstanding clause is following the Constitution Act. That's the only way that that can be done. And that's the way that the feds in the province can settle disputes about laws and rules and who has jurisdiction. Municipal governments aren't so lucky because that same Constitution Act says that the province sets the rules for municipal government. You may hear the term that municipalities are creatures of the province. If you follow municipal news, you may have seen in Alberta in the last week or 10 days that the province indicated it was going to introduce legislation that would enable the provincial cabinet, should it choose, to eject a member from their council seat or to veto any municipal bylaw. That's pretty heavy-handed. However, the province has the authority to do that under the Constitution. So there's a very difference in terms of balance and where the rules come from between federal and provincial versus provincial and municipal. Now, what do those municipal rules look like that municipal councils and hence their committees have to know about or follow? The majority of the key sections you have to deal with are in the Municipal Act 2001. Municipal Act was updated in the early 2000s. It wasn't passed until 2003 or so, but it had been largely unchanged, although in structure, but tinkered with significantly since the 1850s. But that's one place. Clerk of the municipality be intimately familiar with the Municipal Act and its various provisions. But there are things like the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Your chair, deputy mayor, you made reference to declarations of pecuniary interest. There's something called the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act that members need to be aware of. And that would be part of your training under the Code of Conduct. I was under the understanding that that might be part of tonight's training, or will that be subsequent? That'll be subsequent. Okay. So your integrity commissioner will train on that and how to deal with any issues. You raised an issue, I believe, of you said I might have an arm's length interest in something. Integrity commissioner is the person that you need to ask that question of, and they in turn can provide you with a written opinion if you have a written question of them. But that's, again, one of the pieces of legislation that people need to know about. But it's not just a couple of pieces of legislation. There are literally hundreds of municipal acts, regulations, orders, and the like that municipalities and their committees must abide by should they apply. Now, most of them, 99.9% of what's out there is unlikely to apply to this committee and its work. But you need to know about that 1/10 of 1% or that fraction. Interestingly, you talked about getting the best deal. The powers of the corporation are exercised by its council. I believe that's what that first line says there. And in fact, the actual deal, should there be a deal, should there be an agreement, will be reached between the council and the corporation that you're dealing with. They're the ones that have to do it. They're the only ones who can do it. It can't be done by the committee. And council has to exercise that power by bylaw. That's what bylaws are. They're pieces of legislation that municipalities use to sign contracts, to execute agreements, to approve purchase and sale of land, to hire and fire people, and so forth. Council passes bylaws to do that. Your job, as I understand it, will be to provide them advice with respect to what should be contained or not contained in any bylaw that they passed. Now, here's where it starts to get closer to what you're involved with. Municipal bylaws can only be passed In fact, only council can only exercise its powers at duly constituted meetings. So what's a meeting? And this is a critical issue that you need to be aware of. What's a meeting? But before I get into that detail, council's meetings, Meaford's council meetings, have to be conducted in accordance with provincial legislation, then their municipally adopted procedure bylaw, then any other municipal bylaws that have been adopted by Meaford. And then if they can't find a source of procedure in any one of those, they go to something known as Robert's Rules of Order, because that's in their procedure bylaw. And anybody here profess to have some expertise in Robert's Rules of Order? I went up and bought a copy not too long ago. It's you know how heavy it is. It weighs about 3 pounds. I mean, yeah. Municipal clerks, municipal solicitors use it once or twice in their career. It's not something that is used. There are some short guidebooks. You probably as a committee don't even want to get into that. There's a few things that I'll tell you, but should you have a procedural issue, your best bet is turn to the municipal clerk and ask them what the appropriate process is, or to your project advisor, who in turn can then relay it that way. If for some reason you don't like the advice that the clerk is giving you on a matter, then you need to find out from council whether or not you can talk to the municipal solicitor. The municipal solicitor will either confirm or deny and provide that advice. But again, for the most part, I've never known a municipality or a committee to not take the advice of their clerk. However, depending on how tense things can be and how big the stakes are, there are times when, in fact, the clerk will suggest, well, procedurally, maybe we should be talking to the solicitor just to confirm this. So those sorts of things happen. I highly doubt that you're going to run into it, but these are the kinds of things that are far out in the distribution tail that you need to know can happen and how to deal with them. So let's talk about meeting. What is a meeting? And this is something that you're going to have to be careful about. In the Municipal Act, and it's also mentioned in your procedure bylaw word for word, but the Municipal Act is what governs. It says meeting means any regular, special, or other meeting of a council, a local board, or a committee of either of them, where a quorum is present and members discuss or otherwise deal with any matter in a way that materially advances the business or decision-making of the council, local board, or committee. So why is that important? Why is it important to know that definition of the meeting? Well, because meetings can be legal or illegal. And if somebody wants to overturn in court a decision of a body, one of the things they look at is not necessarily the facts of the matter, but the process. People will attack process. So you want to make sure that you don't end up with any process issues. And I'll explain how to avoid that. Now, if you happen to say, well, I'm going to take a look at the Municipal Act and see what it says. And it says in section 238, committees like yours are only covered by this if at least 50% of the members are also members of one or more councils. Well, that's not the case. There's only 3 members, and that's less than 50%. So maybe you're home free. Maybe you can have meetings that don't meet the test of the legislation. However, can't get away with that because the procedure bylaw of the municipality, which is referenced in your terms of reference, says no. The meeting provisions of the Municipal Act are applied to all committees of the council. So what's that mean? Think about it. What's your total population of the committee? My math says it's, what is it? 10 or is it 9?
9.
It's 9. 9, all total members are 9. Excuse me. 7 members. We've got 2 councillors, 7 citizen appointees, elector appointees, 2 councillors and the mayor?
9 public members and 2 non-voting councillors.
And the mayor's ex officio,
Correct.
which means he can attend and speak and do all those other things. He can't vote either though, because your procedure bylaw says the ex officio members can't vote on committees. So there are actually, in terms of total numbers, there's 10, but you have another definition of quorum that we'll get to that kind of ties things up neatly. But for argument's sake, let's just talk about the 7 members who are appointed.
Sorry, Nigel, there are 9 members
9 members,
appointed.
yes.
And then the 2 non-voting council.
So 11?
Yes.
Okay,
plus
9,
plus the mayor
excuse me.
as ex officio.
Okay.
Yes.
I apologize. Thank you for that. Because I did have that number in my head. And I used it in a couple of examples. For a meeting to be legal, whether it's a council meeting or a committee meeting, several things have to happen first. In accordance with the municipal legislation and your procedure bylaw. First is public notice has to be given. Public notice means in accordance with your procedure bylaw and common practice. Mr. Smith, what's the current notice requirements for a committee or a council meeting?
For committee, a week, for council meeting, 6 days.
So it's got to be publicly posted a week in advance of the meeting. Okay. So if a meeting is held, unless it's given public notice with that particular provision, it's not a properly held meeting and can be challenged in court should someone not like the provisions of the meeting. That's one of the things. Second thing, and more importantly, and this is why the numbers were rolling around in my head, I apologize. A quorum of members must be present for a meeting to be held. Now, your terms of reference say that a quorum is how many?
It's 6.
Well, actually, you have a 9-member committee. What's quorum? Quorum is a majority. That's the definition of quorum for any body. It's found in the Municipal Act. So if you have a council that had 5 members, for instance, a smaller council, quorum would be 3. If you had 7 members, quorum would be 5. That's the majority. And with your committee being 9, your quorum is, in your terms of reference, it's played right out. It's 5. 5 of 9, a majority have to be present. Now, interestingly, when you have 5 persons present, you can proceed with the business of the committee. And if you have to take a vote on a matter, how many have to vote in favor? Just the majority, 3. So I would encourage you not to meet very often or on any serious matter with a bare majority, particularly if it's an area where you're going to end up voting on a matter or voting on a piece of advice. So even if the quorum can be met, I think you need to be cautious about whether or not meetings proceed should you be unable to have a larger than bare quorum present. That's just a concern.
Yes, absolutely, Doug, please. Go
Yes,
ahead.
sorry about that. I should have said questions at any time.
So for quorum, is that physically located in this room when that meeting is?
Good question. Your procedure bylaw that governs you indicates that members can participate electronically. And I presume that applies to this committee as well?
It does.
It doesn't. It's not specifically.
Our technology prohibits an effective hybrid meeting, unfortunately.
Okay, even though, all right.
It's a hangover from COVID.
All right, so so the intention is that there will not be electronic attendance by members, correct? I think that should be clarified in the terms of reference, and particularly as the procedure bylaw seems to be ambiguous on it.
And I just hope updated because there's 9 of us, many of which have businesses and other things that are doing, and if we can participate without having to be in the room, that would help make there be a more complete quorum for every meeting, I would think.
So, Madam Chair or Madam Acting Chair, that should be one of the first things that committee considers in terms of the advice and recommendations that it makes to council, because that's how that would, it's a good example of how you would provide that advice. Right. Yeah, my apologies. Any questions or any concerns about anything I say, let me know. Is there anything else I've said before that's given you any cause? I haven't noticed anybody write I quit yet. No. I wouldn't suggest you need to based on this. This is again, as I said before, you only need to really worry about the rules should you get into what I refer to as a tense situation, or seems to be some sort of blatant disregard for what you think the proper protocol is. So what happens though, if there's a social gathering and 5 of the members of this committee happen to be there? What happens in that case? Is that a meeting? There's a quorum there.
Well, the constituted meeting.
Hasn't been called as a meeting, but if a majority of the members are there and they deal with the matter in a way that materially advances the business or decision-making of the body, then it could be deemed to be an illegal meeting. Again, should people want to attack you on process, councils are very, very aware of this. Municipal council, the advice to a municipal council is always something like this. The clerk passes away. You'd expect everybody to show up at his wake. All of council's there. Is it a council meeting? No, it's not a council meeting. Unless the mayor takes a quorum aside to the back room and says, we have to figure out how we're going to fill this position, at least on a temporary basis. Then an illegal meeting is broken out. So you'll find times when there may be a quorum present at a social gathering, or someone will host a barbecue, or there'll be a special event in town. And question is that a meeting? And the answer is, if you don't act in a way that materially advances the business or decision-making of the committee, you're okay. You're not in breach. Just be careful about that. And councils are across the province.
And if I may, Nigel, if anyone has a question, please just raise your
Yeah.
hand. And when you go to ask it, don't forget to turn on your microphone, because anyone listening then will be able to hear you. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Deputy. Appreciate that. What about site visits? So what if the committee decides, well, maybe we should get on a bus and go out and take a look at the particular location? That's a particularly naughty with a K problem. Municipal councils have faced that because municipal councils do road tours. They do tours to look at, or various facility tours, particularly after they've first been elected. And what councils do in that case is they make sure that there's a committee secretaries with them. They make sure that the advance notice has been given of that site tour, and they provide for members of the public, should they wish, to either accompany or be present at the, let's call it the stops at the site tour. If everybody gets on the same bus, you should probably have a seat for 1 or 2 members of the public as well, should they decide to join you. Okay. So I don't know if you followed that practice before, but yes, okay. Don't be surprised with that. Now, why do we do that? Well, the Supreme Court has said the public has a right to observe the decision-making of municipal government. Basically, that's as simple as that. You don't have the ability, any automatic ability to participate, other than vote, but they have the right to observe. So that's the rationale for that. That's the reason. So how do you make recommendations to council? And I'm going to speak a little bit here about the terms of reference. Terms of reference refer to speaking by or using consensus where possible. And that's admirable. If the committee can come to in effect, consensus is a unanimous decision or a decision where no one objects, then that makes for a smooth, let's call it smooth committee functioning and good interpersonal relationships. But there'll be times when the committee members don't agree on an issue or don't agree on a piece of advice or don't agree on the timing. And so how do you deal with that? Well, in fact, you should only, in my opinion, reach consensus by voting on a matter. Because if you don't have a properly worded or appropriately worded motion on the floor, how do you know what it is you're trying to reach consensus on? So you get a report from staff or a report from external parties, and there should be always a recommendation with it that says it is recommended that committee, advice, council, that so-and-so, or committee take the position that so-and-so. That way, the committee knows what they're discussing, what recommendation they're discussing. And in municipal governments, you do it all the time. You don't debate issues or don't discuss them until the motion's on the floor. That's a technical term. On the floor means it's in front of the body. So that way you know what it is you're discussing. Otherwise, you can chase yourself around in circles and rabbit holes and so forth, trying to figure out exactly what it is you're trying to provide people with advice for. So if staff are providing your recommendations or reports, make sure there's a recommendation with it. Sometimes the recommendation is simply that the report be received and referred to council. Simple as that. Okay. Everyone doesn't have to be a convoluted motion with action oriented action orientation, because much of what you do is going to be hearing information, receiving delegations or deputations, and providing or working as a conduit for that information through to council. So often that'll be your advice to council. And in fact, the minutes of the committee are going to be the reports of this committee to council. Minutes are the proceedings and decisions of the committee. And that's how committees speak. That's how committees report by through their minutes and any documents that are attached to those minutes. So how do you start your meetings? What do you start with? Well, all of your meetings need to have an agenda. If you don't have an agenda, you don't have an itemized list of what it is you're going to deal with, like you've started with today here, Madam Acting Mayor, or Acting Chair, then you're just having a conversation. So you need to have an agenda. I don't know if there's, I don't think there's anybody else here old enough to have studied Latin in school, but agenda comes from the Latin root about acting. It's the actions that are expected of the body. That's where the word agenda comes from. Meaford's procedure bylaw sets out the format of the agenda, and your terms of reference talk about who's going to develop that agenda. It's going to be between the staff plus the chair, when the chair is selected, and what's referred to as one rotating member of the committee is going to meet prior to every committee meeting to set the agenda for that particular meeting. The agendas will flow out of a work plan that you adopt as a committee, and that work plan presumably will be with the subsequent approval of council. But then your agendas for your meetings will have a particular format. Who takes the minutes? Well, that's a staff job. Staff takes the minutes of council. Who was there? What were the items that were discussed? And what were the decisions of the body? Don't expect staff to provide a flavor of the discussion that took place. If somebody makes a presentation to the body, ask them to give you a written submission, and that written submission can be attached to your minutes. Because asking staff to take notes and try and give a précis is virtually impossible. It's done with court reporters. It's done with Hansard that's the proceedings of the provincial and federal legislature, but they've got multiple people recording, they've got multiple people comparing and with a recording to what's actually written. You don't have that. We don't have that in municipal government, quite frankly. And in fact, the legislation only requires that the proceedings, who was there and what decisions were made, doesn't require word for word. So if you happen to speak at the committee meeting and you're brilliant, just because you're brilliant doesn't mean that the clerk or committee secretary is required or able to write that into the material, into the minutes of the meeting. In fact, staff are required to take it without note or comment.
Through you, Nigel.
Please.
In terms of personal notes during meetings or other discussions, for various reasons, people may want to take their notes and have more detail.
Mhm.
Can you talk about or touch on that in relation to freedom of information request?
Interesting comment. Yep. No.
But
yeah, that's not an area that I'm familiar with as to notes that may be taken in council and what kind of action. Mr. Smith, are you aware of any member of council ever having their notes in a council meeting requested?
My opinion is that only officers of the municipality can have their notes taken through freedom of information requests, and mayor and deputy mayor and members of staff, but individual members of council and by extension committee members will personal notes that will be
Okay. My advice whenever I'm helping somebody do a hiring, which I do sometimes, is that members of committee are taking notes. For goodness sakes, don't write anything that you would be embarrassed by on your note sheet in future should it become public. And that would be my same advice to members of the committee as well. Even if you think somebody raised something outlandish or my presentation today, don't write down what an idiot. Okay, that's just in case. Does that cover your thought? Thank you, Norton. When the minutes are provided to council can't change your minutes because it's a record of what happened. The council's job is to simply receive them. Now, if council has an action that's coming out of the matters being discussed, then they don't necessarily have to take your advice, but that's contained in the minutes. You're not bound by that. Your advice is your advice, just like staff advice is staff advice. Council's not bound by it. Council can do something else. But on the other hand, they can't change what happened at committee. It's a record of what happened. And the minutes, of course, are a public document. This is a little bit beyond my mandate, but just very simply, from terms of an agenda, first thing that happens in a meeting is call to order. The chair will do that as soon as a quorum is present. You use a land acknowledgement. Your standard agenda for council meetings, if I interpret your bylaw correctly, starts with the land acknowledgement, proceeds to a moment of reflection. I would presume the committee would do the same thing. And then a request for declarations of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof. Very standard municipal process. Next thing is usually announcements, and often it may be the chair that has some particular piece of news that they wish to announce. You do the minutes of the previous meeting in terms of the approval, and that approval is only are there any errors or omissions. It's not, I wish we should change what we had in those minutes. Well, no, you can't. They're a record. You can't change it. And then there may be some correspondence that's being filed with the committee. And the committee may be asked to deal with that correspondence with one motion to receive it or multiple pieces of correspondence, or if you wish to pull one particular piece out and discuss it in more detail, then it would be pulled and dealt with separately. And the non-controversial items would all be dealt with by one motion. The other one would be received separately. Then you get into the real meat of what you're going to do. And according to your procedure bylaw, that would be deputations. Those are short presentations. Then you have a longer presentation format in the procedure bylaw, and then invited presentations. It can get a little confusing. You probably won't have all three every meeting, but just to know that there are some occasions where they're short presentations, some where they're a little longer, and then the final ones where they're longer still. And you may in fact have some other presentations that you wish to receive or submissions that will be much more lengthy. Those might come from staff or technical experts. The bottom line, though, is that each of these should be backed up with a written submission from the party making the presentation. If they're to be a formal presentation, people need to have a track record of what it is the committee dealt with. Another item, reports from staff or consultants would be another item. And then your procedure bylaw that you're governed by says that council and committee meetings have a public question period. That's an interesting issue. That means basically any member of the public who's in attendance can stand and ask a question or pose a question of the committee. Doesn't mean you have to answer it. Okay. In fact, you may not have an answer. It may be just a very short question. It's not to be confused with the 5-minute deputations that people have. If they wish to give you their opinion or a position on something, they should be referred to the next meeting for a deputation. But public question period, it may be that somebody has a question about something that was raised during the meeting and they're just confused about it or want to have some clarification. But I don't know what the practice is at your council meetings. Does public question period take long period of time at your council meetings?
Not usually.
Not usually. I would think so. It's not the place for debate. It just happens to be on occasion. And then finally adjournment, right? But that's a standard. You'll see agenda develop with that kind of pattern. And don't be surprised if it's somewhat formulaic, because that's what's been determined by council already. Now, when you get to your first meeting, here's some of the key issues you're going to decide or need to decide. So and I don't think I'm jumping the gun here on any of this, but you're going to have to select a chair and vice chair. That's in accordance with your terms of reference. My expectation is that you're going to adopt a schedule and timing for your meetings. There is an outline of what meetings are expected to be held in terms of a rough timeline, but you may need to get more into schedule in terms of time of day in order to accommodate members and or public. You should figure out the estimated duration of your meetings. We're going to meet until they're over. Well, I'm not sure that that's a really good strategy. You want to set a curfew, as it were, or a stop time for your meetings. I suspect that most of your meetings will take more than an hour. You get up to 2 hours, then people's attention starts to flag, quite frankly. And if you're trying to wrestle with an issue, after that 2-hour time, it gets more difficult. So you need to have some sense of what the appropriate length of time it is. You need to figure out a formula, because if you're going to rotate members for agenda setting, then you're going to have to figure out what order you're going to go in. All right. And who's going to be first and who's going to be second, third, and so forth. At some point, you're going to need, in your first meeting, I think, some background presentation from staff as to what's happened up until this point and what the expectations are going forward. Because at least you can get your head around what you're going to be faced with, so that you can develop a work plan, or with the advice from staff, develop a work plan. So you got to know the task, you got to know the work plan and how that's going to roll out, and how long you expect this to last. And then at some point, you're also going to have to wrestle with the issue of a recommendation to council with respect to budget. Or you need to ask the questions with respect to budget. If there are some things that the committee would like to have some independent advice on, does the committee have the capacity to have a budget or not? And I think that's a question to be appropriately posed to council. And council needs to be able to respond to that. But committee can't make it up on its own because you don't have the authority to raise money or spend money unless council provides you with that capacity. Madam Chair, I think that covers everything, but the real question is, or the real issue, I think, is you need to know that there should be some structure, and that structure will save you a lot of grief should you get into a difficult time. Same with the chair, and I'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. But if you have some structure in terms of how you expect the meeting to proceed, when you expect the meetings to be held, how long you expect them to go, and what the conduct is within the meetings, then they will be much smoother. And should there be some disagreement or conflict, you'll have an easier time trying to resolve that. If you have appreciation, there are rules. Procedure bylaw of the municipality is 34 pages long. You may or may not want to read that. Robert's Rules of Order, I wouldn't bother reading that. General Roberts was a Civil War general from the US. He retired from the army and got involved with the church group. And he went to the first meeting and there were no rules of procedure. So he thought he would write a short procedural manual so he could work a little better with that. His first one was 100 and some odd pages long. The one that he finally ended up with is this thick. It's the US version of the Westminster parliamentary practice that's followed in the British Parliament, the Canadian Parliament, the US House of Representatives and Congress, and it deals with all kinds of unusual circumstances. There are other versions, but or other rules of order, but it's the one that's most commonly cited. But again, what's it used for? It's used to get people out of trouble when there's a problem arises in terms of procedure. It's as simple as that. Any other questions? More than happy to try and help you with them.
Please go ahead, Harley.
Well, thanks, Deputy Mayor. Thanks, Nigel. Interesting stuff. Doesn't matter how many times I see this. It's good to have a reminder. The budget recommendations. This is something I've been wondering about how we're going to put something like this together, especially at the first meeting. As you well know, it's difficult enough to project a budget when you've got previous year's budgets to base the new budget on. We don't have that with a brand new committee, and maybe well, not maybe, I'm sure Mr. Smith has some ideas about that. I'm hoping this doesn't have to be decided too soon.
Well, let me give you my advice before Mr. Smith, if I might, because I think I can help him out with this. And that is one of the first things that the committee should do. It should formally ask by resolution the council as, could we have a report at our next meeting, that's after your first meeting, as to how the committee, what the expectation is of the committee with respect to spending money, developing a budget, or matters related to finances. And that way you will get an answer back that can give you some meat like that, rather than trying to figure it out on the floor of your first committee meeting. Mr. Smith, is that consistent?
Yes, thank you, Nigel. I think that's generally how we'll do it. I don't think you'll necessarily need to ask council for that. We'll probably bring some things forward as part of the update on what's happened so far from the municipal point of view on things like the work plan that council's approved and the costs that we anticipate. So I think I very much see that your staff will help produce a budget based on what the committee needs rather than you as individuals having to know what things cost and how to add that up.
Okay, Harley, are there any other questions for Nigel at this point? Please go ahead.
So I'm not sure. It's not really of Nigel. I just want to clarify from my side as well what Doug had just commented about with hybrid meetings. We've been told tonight that this is probably the most important committee that Meaford's ever had. And I think all the people around the table who have volunteered feel the weight of that. And we sincerely want to do a good job. And I feel with 9 diverse people, with all of the things that go on in 9 diverse lives, to prevent us from attending these meetings and having more than 5 for vote, for instance, from quorum that Nigel has recommended you don't vote on at this point in time. We would be essentially handicapped if we could not have the ability to have a hybrid meeting. I really feel it is a most important thing that we can start as quickly as possible. Because without it, it will be very difficult for us to accomplish our goal. Plus, it will delay things. Because if we don't have more than the minimal of 5, like Nigel has said, you might want not to have vote that night, something crucial. So again, I just wanted to make that statement, and I'm not sure if this is the correct spot for it, but I thought I'd jump in. So thank you very much.
No, absolutely, Bob. By all means, anyone jump forward with any questions that you have. That's absolutely the purpose of this evening. And Mr. Smith, I'll turn that question over to you to explain the challenges with operating a hybrid meeting here at Council Chambers.
Thank you, Shirley. There are a few different elements to this. One is unfortunately still our internet connection here. Once we get too many things coming in and out of this building, we have it does tend to drop a little bit. The other is just the system that we've built here, which makes it a little difficult to do a good view for people who, you know, if Bob is perhaps at home, he would be half of a screen, and then one camera would be for the whole of the rest of the committee, and so it's a little harder for people to see what's happening. Derek's our wonderful tech person hiding in the back there. We are going to have a bit of a chat about what our options might be. It will need some investment if we are able to move this forward, and so that then becomes a council conversation, and so that may well be part of something the committee wants to talk about from a budget point of view, about whether or not that's something that we should move forward.
Please go ahead, Bob.
I'm fine if you don't see my face when I'm speaking remotely. I'm very okay with that. I'm very serious about that. If we can have our voice, that would be just fine. You know, so if it's that's something that would get us over the hurdle, absolutely. I think it's something that we could put to a vote for sure. Our first vote.
We'll certainly look at some options. I think from a public watching point of view, disembodied voices are not great. We have dealt with that a few times during the pandemic with council meetings and things. But we'll look into some options and see what we can do. Definitely heard the feedback today.
I appreciate that, Mr. Smith. It has been a conversation that we have had as a council on a few occasions, and perhaps it's time that we see if we can solve that dilemma. Any other questions? Nora? You'll need a microphone, Norm.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Nigel. And Nigel, I think of the one meeting that we happened to both be at in Northern Ontario, where I want to talk that comment on the formality of the procedure and setting the tone, because usually an informal meeting is okay, but perhaps it will cause problems.
Good question. And that's one of the things I focus on in the role of the chair, because the chair has a particular responsibility. So when we get to the shorter presentation on the role of the chair, I'll certainly cover that. Very important.
Thank you. And I do believe that our dinner has arrived. Would I be right, Kirsten? So I think we'll call a short break now at 6:14, and we'll, shall we collect our meals? Are they in the kitchen, Kirsten? And bring them back. There isn't room in the kitchen for everyone. So if we bring them back to our seats, and we'll try and resume by 6:30 or 6:35 with the next section, which Nigel already explained is the role of the chair. Okay, so we'll go right through here.
Wait for one.
Yeah, we'll just wait a second for Harley. All right, and we will resume at 6:39, all set to go.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Excuse me. This is going to be a shorter presentation. It's on the role of the chair, and it's less formal because the rules with respect to a chair are more informal than they are formal. However, there's a couple of things that everyone should be well aware of. But let's just start with your terms of reference and what it says about the chair. It says that the chair will be selected by a majority of the committee at its inaugural meeting. That's pretty clear. So at the next meeting or the first meeting of the committee, one of the first things you'll do at some point is, well, maybe not the first thing, but maybe at the end, there'll be a selection of a chair. And it'll be the majority of the members. Presumably there will be an election. It'll be usually something like this is conducted by the clerk who calls for nominations, and person will move somebody and you'll look for a seconder to the nomination, and then we'll call for other nominations and then lay out the process in advance should there be more than one. So if you wish to be the chair, one of the things you may want to do is to talk to some of your colleagues in advance and explain why they should vote for you if your name comes up as chair.
I noticed he was looking at you, Dave.
Yeah. Yeah, no, he was smiling. And on a motion like this, you can always vote for yourself as well. You can actually make the motion yourself as well. Usually you don't. Usually somebody else makes it. Okay. And then there's another motion needed to select the vice chair. So those are two. The terms of reference are clear that the vice chair cannot be one of the elected officials, but the chair could be, whether or not one of the elected officials is willing to accept the chair or prefers to decline. We'll know that in the future, but it doesn't have to be. But the vice chair must be a person who is cannot be the mayor or either of the other two members from the council. The vice chair only acts in the absence of the chair. So when does the vice chair act? Well, it may be that, excuse me, that there's an issue on the floor, and in many cases, a chair of a meeting will not enter into the debate from the chair. They will in fact pass the gavel ceremoniously, if you don't have a gavel, but in fact, pass the chairmanship role over to the vice chair while he or she is debating the issue on the floor. The role of the chair has an informal power role, and usually you don't debate issues or express opinions in any significant way from the chair. That's the normal process. So what's the main duty of the chair? Well, there are things that have to happen before, meeting, during, and after. But predominantly, the preparation is critical. I don't know if anybody here was ever a Boy Scout. I think they're changing the names. They're now just Scouts, both US and here, or Girl Guides, just guides. The motto is be prepared. Same for everybody who's a member of a committee or a member of municipal council. It's important to be prepared. How are you prepared? Well, you have to know the terms of reference that have been laid out for the committee. You may wish to get into the procedure bylaw and try and understand what it says, because there may be times when you need to refer to it on a process matter, although you probably won't end up doing that very often, if at all, but you should at least have access to it. you should adopt a public-oriented perspective. Think about this. And that's the chair. The chair's job is to make sure that the committee meets its mandate of receiving advice, information, presentations from the public, and then can transmit that advice to transmit that advice to council with its judgment and consideration applied. But the important part of this committee is public engagement. So more so than anybody else on the committee, the chair, I think, has a responsibility to chair a meeting, not just from the perspective as a member of the committee, but also saying, okay, what does this look like? What does this feel like from the person standing at the podium presenting, from the people in the audience, from the people who are listening at home, whether it be audio or whether it be visual on Zoom. So the chair's got that additional responsibility. And they need to be mindful of both remote and in-person viewers. We often forget the people that are calling in, dialing in, viewing in, zooming in, whatever the term is. And we may need to make sure that they can hear, see, and do everything that they need to, as well as anybody in the room if we possibly can. First thing a chair needs to do is call the meeting to order as soon as everybody's present. It's not in anybody's procedure bylaw, but best advice is start all meetings on time. As soon as you've got a quorum present, even if you got some stragglers, don't wait for them. Why should people who don't pay attention to the rules punish those people who do and take up their time? So the expectation is, if you set the expectation that you'll start on time, then people will show up early and be there on time. It's the chair, more so than any other member, sets the tone for the meeting. It's important that the chair follow the agenda. If you expect other people to follow it, then the chair does, of course. After the land acknowledgement, the moment of reflection, and whatever starting elements there are, there may be some brief opening remarks by the chair. If there had been something unusual happened that wishes to draw to the attention of everyone. They may wish to make those opening remarks, but not necessarily. The call for declarations, again, it's the chair who is walking other members through the agenda, and they call for declarations of pecuniary interest and so forth. And I apologize, the screen from here is a little difficult to see what slides up. The font has changed from the font that you'll see on your slides, and I don't know why. PowerPoint does that sometimes to you, and it makes it a little more difficult for people to follow. So the one we're on,
Go forward 4 slides.
pardon? It jumped forward. Yeah, it's about 4 forward. One of the disadvantages of being a little older is you wear bifocals in the top and the bottom. You can get one focal length just fine. The other one's working. So in terms of managing the discussion. Oh, I should take you back. Sorry, rather than go forward 4. One of the key things that a chair must do is to make sure the discussion is at the issue in hand. And that's why a motion is important, to have something duly moved and seconded, so you know what it is you're discussing and debating. If somebody comes forward with a deputation, it's not the role of the committee or members or chair to debate with that person. A lot of people would come and love to debate with you, but that's not your role of the committee. Your role of the committee is to seek and receive information. So be careful not to make sure that any deputation or delegation that's going to appear before you has a clearly set out list of expectations before they appear. Mr. Smith, do you have one for the municipality generally that you hand out to people who wish to be delegates at a council or committee meeting? It's often a good practice. Many municipalities have that, so people know what to expect, the time they can speak, and how many people from a group can speak if there's multiple speakers. And the fact that it's not about posing questions. They're not here to interrogate the committee or cross-examine the committee. They're here to offer their advice and wisdom to you. That's their role. It might be that members of the committee ask a presenter or a delegate or a deputant, whichever term you're using, for a question of clarification. I say, well, thank you very much for your presentation. In your presentation, you mentioned so-and-so. Could you elaborate on that briefly? And people should not expect that gives them a license to speak for another 20 minutes from the podium, because some people will do that. It's one of the chair's role is to keep that on target. Chair's job is to develop a light but firm hand on the application of the rules of the meeting and keep it moving smoothly. The other one that's in every procedure bylaw in the province and will affect this committee as well as the chair has a responsibility to maintain decorum. So what's decorum? It's not a term we use very often, but all it means is appropriate behavior. And there will be some definitions in the procedure bylaw, but basically it's that people don't speak out of order, people don't insult people don't criticize the individual rather than a position, and so forth, and don't abide by the rules. That's the chair's job, is to make sure that people maintain decorum. There's lots of people that have those roles in society. Teacher has that one in the classroom. It's teacher's job to maintain decorum in the classroom, right? It was when I went to school, or else I could get sent to the office. That's one of the things that can happen, right? Same thing. Chair of a committee does that. If a member of the committee thinks that the chair is not maintaining decorum or not following the rules, then any member can, technically the word is rise, but say, point of order, Madam Chair, and can interrupt as long as nobody else is speaking. But any person can raise a point of order, and what it is, and the person should say, here's the rule that's not being followed. The speaker at the podium insulted member of the committee or insulted the committee, or words that's inappropriate. I would ask you to ask them for an apology. That's a point of order. The chair sometimes will say something like, oh, don't worry about that. That's just Matt. We know what Matt's like. He's been like that all his life. That's not a good excuse. Okay, that's not an excuse for poor behavior. Sorry, Matt, but that's, yeah. If the chair rules, the chair, when they do that, has ruled. If the chair expresses an opinion like that, say your point of order is denied, Matt's always been like that. We just let it go. Any other member, including the person who brought up the first point of order, can appeal the ruling of the chair. And that appeal goes to the entire body to an immediate vote. And the vote is on the motion, shall the ruling of the chair be sustained? And the ruling of the chair was, that's just Matt, he's okay. And they can vote either to support the chair or not to support the chair. And if they don't support the chair, then the request in the original point of order to ask for the apology of the member is on the floor again. Now, that doesn't happen very often, but point of order isn't a means for requesting, I want to talk again. A lot of places people will use that. Oh, point of order. They just want to interrupt the conversation and jump in again. That's not what it's for. Now, there's another type of point of order you should be aware of. There are many, but these are the two primary ones. Are points of privilege or points of personal privilege. It's where one member says after another member's spoken, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. How could you be so dumb? Basically, what that member has done is it insulted the intelligence or integrity of the speaker, whether it's a member of committee or whether it's a person making a deputation. That's inappropriate too. Your job is to debate information, ideas, but not the sender or the individual that holds those information or ideas. Chair has to rule on that. And again, if any person doesn't agree with the ruling of the chair, it can be appealed to the committee for that process. It's not the sort of thing that you send off to the integrity commissioner for a complaint under the code of conduct. That takes a lot of time, takes a lot of money. And in fact, some commissioners, integrity commissioners, will not even deal with a matter that's a procedural matter at a council, saying council could have decided that on its own. It's not one for us to decide. You set the rules inside your council chambers. But again, some take a different position. Anyway, if, however, a person, either somebody in the audience, a deputation, or a member of committee, does not take the chair's advice to behave appropriately, or the committee's advice to behave appropriately, the chair has the power in the Municipal Act. Has the power in the Municipal Act, and that can't be taken away. It can't be modified, in my opinion, to exclude any person from a meeting for improper conduct. Now, it's just for that individual meeting. It's not for every meeting, but they can eject a person from a meeting for inappropriate behavior. Doesn't happen very often, but if you go to Oshawa City Council on YouTube, you can find some members of the public that were actually dragged out by Durham Regional Police for inappropriate behavior and being ejected by the mayor, probably about 8 or 9 years ago. There's an unusual thing you may hear on a regional CBC News recently about the city of Stratford has allegedly banned 3 members of the public from council meetings for a period of several months for improper behavior. That's not the chair that did that. That was a notice of trespass that was issued. That's how that's done. And that is rarely done. Those are really, really rare. Matt, you ever had experience with a notice of trespass?
Not related to council meetings.
No, not related to council meetings. If for some reason or other you find as chair that has to happen, it's usually best to call a brief recess at the same time so that the person can be encouraged to vacate the council chambers rather than try to get on with the business of the committee while the committee is in process. And if the person refused to leave, then during that recess, you call a constable and have them removed from the meeting. This happens quite frankly, 1 in 1,000 meetings. Or in fact, it probably happens 1 in 5,000 meetings. But it can happen and there is a process. And sometimes passions are really, really high on controversial issues. So there is that process. You'll hear something about provincial or federal legislature where they call someone to order or name a member. That's not in your process. Calling someone to order is similar to asking a person in advance of somebody raising a point of privilege to behave with decorum. That's calling to order. That's what the speakers do. When a speaker names a member in the legislature, they're ejecting them from the legislature. So they always call them the member from Kicking Horse Pass, or whatever the writing is. Would the member for Kicking Horse Pass come to order? That's just a request to the person to sit down, shut up, and quit heckling or whatever they're doing. And however, if they name the member and say, MP Broadfoot, who was the member for Kicking Horse Pass, he's been ejected, and the sergeant at arms escorts him from the room for that meeting. Rarely happens, but every chair should at least have it in the back of their head, and the committee should know that kind of process can happen, especially where the debate gets passionate about an item, and some people may be that way. Chair of the meeting, it's like the conductor of an orchestra. You know the score, that's the agenda. You know the players, that's your members of your committee, plus the staff. You know what the roles of various ones are. And your main job as a chair is just to keep time. That's what the orchestra, that's what the the conductor has a baton for. It's keeping time and to indicate who plays the dominant role next. So that's probably the best description. Although the chair can, if they wish, pass the baton to the vice chair and speak to an issue. That's the best practice. So those are the key elements, and be happy to answer any further questions that you might have. Sorry about that. On the role of the chair.
And do we have any questions for Nigel on the role of the chair? Please go ahead, Bob.
Nigel, if I heard you correctly, you're saying that one of the elected officials can be chair. Does that include the mayor, who's an ex officio?
You have to look at the terms of reference. I don't think that's the intention of the terms of reference at all. Okay. But the intention, the terms of reference are silent on excluding elected officials from the terms of reference are clear that the vice chair cannot be an elected official. It's one way or the other. Excuse me, I have to get back to the terms, but I would not expect the mayor to be the chair either. That's just the way I've read it. I don't think it's the intention is that the elected officials would be running the meetings, but there may be provision in one of them.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
And if I may add further clarification, Bob, it absolutely is the intention of council that one of the public members chair and vice chair this committee.
Thank you, Shirley.
Further questions for Nigel? Okay, then we thank you very, very much, Nigel, for being here and for taking us through all of this information. Really informative and really gets us off to a good start. Thank you. And next on our agenda is media training, and we're very fortunate to have Brian Lambie here with us from Red Brick, who's going to lead us through this next phase of our meeting.
Proceed. Hello, folks. You did nice introductions at the beginning, and I sat back there. So I wear many hats. Leaving here to go to a cottage on Georgian Bay that's been in the family for 30 years or 70 years. I'm a fishaholic, so I care about water quality, particularly in Georgian Bay. So I spend a lot of time. I sit on the Zone 20 Advisory Council for the Ministry of Natural Resources to deal with fisheries in Lake Ontario. I also help municipal governments and folks who are being yelled at. That could be you. No good deed goes unpunished. So I appreciate the fact that you volunteered your time to do this. You may find at times, was it the right decision? So I want to kind of arm you with some strategies and practical things that you can use for those moments where this can become stressful. Again, not everybody will thank you, so I'm going to thank you up front. I think what you're doing is important. Now, where do I come by the information that we're going to give to you here today? I'm going to focus on media. We're going to talk a little about social media as well. I probably want to do a bit of calisthenics to find out just a little bit about what you currently do on social media. It's important to know. You probably want a show of hands on a few things. This is the media line for the Association of Municipalities of Ontario and for a number of other municipal associations. And it has been for about 20 years, which means I take calls from the same reporters that will call you or could call you. I've watched Meaford change actually over time. And I've watched media in Meaford change over time. And some of the reporters that have covered this story so far are reporters that I deal with on a daily basis. So I'll be drawing from all of that. I also moderate a local Facebook page in my home of Mississauga. It's about 8,000 people. I've done that through the pandemic at a time when people were anxious and angry. And there's a lot that we can draw from there in terms of how we help a neighborhood through contentious discussions, right? In a way that's designed to be helpful. Now, Nigel gave you some good advice on, well, sort of what the rules are. Those are the rules inside this building. The rules out on the street out there are a strange and dynamic place. And you may want to apply some rules to get people to be more constructive and productive. Typically, we're going to have to inspire them to do that. And there's some things that we can do to, there's some ways that you can approach the work you do to inspire that. All right. Okay. I'm going to go through, I gave you a pile of information there. I'm going to go through a kind of, some of us are old enough to remember Cole's Notes. It's going to be the Cole's Notes version. It'll be a little shorter than some of the material that's in front of you. We'll get you out of here at a reasonable time tonight. But we are dealing with the tricky topic of how do we deal with some of these stressful moments where you have to communicate a complicated topic in a conscientious way. All right. How do we advance? So I think I can advance with this guy right here. Look at that. Okay, fantastic. So I'm hoping to head from here to a campfire. I'll probably be there by myself, but if I was there with a bunch of people and we're swapping stories, the good stories around that campfire are going to have a rich combination of these three things that make them interesting: change, controversy, and human interest. Your mayor's a former news guy, so he knows this this miraculous combination pretty well. Some of you, it may be new to you. Some of the things that you may feel are really, really important and should be able to, should capture the public's imagination, you may be surprised to find don't. So, you know, folks in this room, everybody in the neighborhood should be concerned about property tax assessment. But in my neighborhood, everybody in my neighborhood should be concerned about property tax assessment for sure. It's an important topic. It's important people know how it works. I couldn't get that conversation off the ground. But a coyote wandered down the street and tore a cat in half. If I put that post out on our local page, people will go bananas. It's got violence, it's got kittens, change, controversy, conflict, human interest. It's got all the right ingredients that it's going to be a lively discussion. Now you're talking about energy storage and things like that. It's a lot of engineering. How interesting is that? Should be fascinating, some of it. But some of the things people may get excited about may not be the things that you expect they get excited about until you start thinking about how this process works. Negative stories have a richer combination of these elements than good news stories do. So you'll notice in there, I don't have a reporter in that photo. I've got a picture of some people in an office water cooler. Think about the places you work. If something truly riveting happened in your workplace, but the same day somebody was terminated, what are people talking about in the lunchroom? The great news, advancement, the big deal you signed, the expansion you're making, the sales that you landed, or the termination. It's more likely that the termination is going to be a newsworthy topic. All right. So it's important that we kind of understand that. The more we understand that, the more we can understand what's going to be a hot topic in the coffee shops. How do we deal with that? How do we explain what we're seeing on places like Facebook when this topic is being discussed? Why is this reporter asking me these questions? And which answer is the right answer? And why is it important to focus? Because, you know, often when we talk about media relations, we talk about preparation and planning. And that's because the most important thing you say in an interview may not be the most interesting thing you say in an interview. And honestly, the reporter's only interested in the most interesting thing he said in the interview, right? So we need to start thinking about what needs to be interesting. What, what things do we make interesting? What things do we make boring? If I want people to understand my perspective, how do we do that? How do we make things interesting? But then also, how do we do it in a way that's helpful and productive and constructive? As Nigel said, circles like this, everybody needs to learn how to work together well and disagree well. When we're talking about media and social media, this is one of those moments where we need some leadership to make sure that you're creating that culture and tone throughout the whole community. And you do have a bearing on how that plays out. You will set the tone for how this discussion works across the community. All right, news travels in real time. You're going to notice that news will travel faster than Meaford does, faster than the municipality does. And there's some reasons for that. Media, when they're looking to get information about this story, you may also find that the speed of that story trumps the desire to make sure that the information is accurate. And that causes problems for people like Matt over here. As Matt's caring and conscientious on staff, Matt's not going to want to communicate until we got all the facts right. We have all the information. We know it's true. And when we're good and ready, we will communicate factual information to the universe. The universe will have other ideas about what's floating out there and how fast the information is traveling. And a lot of that information could be false as well. But we do need to recognize that there is a need for speed when we get this stuff right. Now, Matt's going to want to communicate when all the words are perfect. And there's probably so much, what do we do legal? Is external legal? Do we have legal in the, okay, so there's going to be stuff that lawyers look at, and there's going to be stuff that engineers argue about. And they're going to want to make sure all the language is absolutely perfectly precise. And again, this is one of those moments while they're making sure that we have all the exact precise words, the neighborhood will be having a completely different discussion using their own language. So we need to recognize that, you know, those perfect words are being created for audiences that actually don't read very much. You're probably going to get a lot of reading put in front of you. Other people in the community are not going to read through all that material. They will consume content, and that tends to be photographs, graphics, videos, that sort of thing. That kind of content is likely to capture people's attention to a greater degree than the written word will. Okay, that content, by the way, is fairly easy to create. You're having an interesting discussion about whether your meetings should be in person or online. If they're online, I do need you to kind of just get your head around the fact, you know, and the question was asked about what to carry it, you know, what do we put in our notes? Well, for my entire career, I've been writing every single email with what will it look like in the Toronto Star. Right? This is normal for me. It needs to kind of become normal for you because this is the world that you're operating now to some degree. The only real downside on that is it forces you to be sensible. It's not a bad thing, right? So it means that you have to think about what you write down, be careful and be conscientious about it. If your meetings are broadcast, then any moment in your meeting can be captured with something as simple as a cell phone and turned into a social media post. So it's not just what you keep in your notes, it's also how do you communicate with one another and how do you interact with one another. All of that arguably is ripe for social media content, right? It's worth thinking about. Okay, now in terms of governance, typically the way these things work, I defer to Nigel on all these matters for sure, and clerks. Clerks are good at this stuff. They're good at being boring, and that's an art. No offense to the clerks, I admire it. So when we can deal with complicated matters in a boring way that people can follow and understand, we're probably getting it right. Okay, so in terms of governance, typically, if you've got a board or a body, the chair is the voice who speaks for consensus of the board, where consensus exists. Disagreement is absolutely, oh, I'm a little far behind here. I'll boil up here. So disagreement is absolutely normal. The question is, how well do you disagree? And I would say that Meaford disagrees better than it used to, I've had a long enough career. You know, there have been times where I knew about politics in Meaford in Mississauga. That's never a good sign, right? Quite frankly, when Meaford's doing a good job of having difficult conversations, it should be compelling for the people of Meaford. If I'm hearing about it in Mississauga, things are going wrong, right? Okay, that dysfunction tends to erode public trust. And I just want to, there may be times when you really disagree with one another. I hope you're all going to love each other and get along great. That may not happen. One thing I want you to think about is that, you know, if McDonald's says that Burger King gives you botulism and Burger King says that McDonald's gives you salmonella, what does the public do? Who do they choose? Pizza. They just step back and walk away from the whole thing. So there are often moments where you may be having a disagreement with one another and you may be thinking that you're winning it. You want to step back and think, are we winning this battle but losing the whole war, basically? What you typically want in a situation when you're dealing with sensitive matters like you're dealing with is for the neighborhood to have an informed, calm, and conscientious, well thought out discussion. And you will have to kind of set and maintain that tone. You'll have an important role in that. Okay, one way you do that is you avoid surprises. Matt doesn't. Everybody in town thinks Matt gets paid too much. I know Matt doesn't get paid enough. So we don't want to surprise him. All right, his job's hard enough. You know, you got a fairly small staff here. If you're in a larger municipality, you'd have all kinds of staff helping with every detail, but you've got to deal with an awful lot in one business card. So let's not surprise him or anyone else. When we disagree with folks, we want to make sure that goes well. Now, to give you an idea of that, I'm going to combine all my loves, what I do and fishing. And I guess I should include my wife and family in there if they're watching. It's a live meeting. The Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. There are times when the folks that we work with poke them right in the eye or kick them in the shins. And when we do that, we call them and we say, we just talked to the Toronto Star. You need to get ready for it. These are the types of questions we had. You won't be surprised by what we said. They're probably coming to you today or tomorrow. Good luck. How's the wife and kids? Great. Now, the guy who was the issues manager at the ministry for 15 years, when he retired, we went on a fishing trip together. We couldn't do it when he was working there. That wouldn't be appropriate, but we got to know each other well enough that we went on a fishing trip together afterward. Now, what I'm looking for is the same kind of thing from him. He'll call me up and he'll say, we just heard from the Premier's office. I can't give you any detail, but whatever you're doing tomorrow, cancel it and get in early. And good luck. That's what we're looking for. Just a little heads up so we're not surprising anybody. If you're following that principle and some of the things we're talking about, this is going to go better for everybody. Now, in terms of what role you can play and where your strengths are for the body that you have, you can provide responsive and caring leadership. You can reach audiences that a lot of other folks can't reach. I like Norm. Some people aren't going to talk to Norm. You know, they're going to be suspicious of folks. They shouldn't be suspicious of you. So you're an ear to the ground, an ear on the rail. They can hear when irritants are coming up or things need to be addressed, that input's going to be helpful. You can demonstrate listening to a greater degree than some other folks can. And you can also help connect audiences to informed sources, particularly in discussions like social media. Some people may be asking for your opinions on a topic, but quite frankly, your opinions are probably going to be forming over time. One of the key things you can do in all those moments where you're doing a lot of interacting is make sure that folks are following the right discussions and finding the right information so that they're having an informed discussion. Okay, now municipal staff are going to support you. There's things municipal staff do really well. And I think Matt likes me well enough that I can say that one of them is they can make things boring. They can provide good quality information in a way that's kind of neutral and should be helpful. They provide professional support advice to you, planning and management focus. They round up details when you need it. They maintain a lot of your formal communications tools and channels that you use. And again, they can deliver information in a fairly neutral way, more so than elected officials can, quite frankly. Now, if we're going to be putting all of that together and we're going to communicating quickly, and at times there may be a need to communicate fairly quickly, I want to just kind of get your head around how that works. I don't think you do not need to become technical experts on this project to do a sensible job. And quite frankly, if somebody's looking for technical information, you know, what I would hope you be doing is steering them to the technical people and engineers, and then also holding the engineers' feet to the fire so that A, we know the information they're providing is credible and true and honest, but also making sure that it's in plain language and people in Meaford can understand it. And quite frankly, if that's a challenge, I think you as an advisory body should push back on them a little bit. The technical people that are explaining the project should be able to explain that in plain language. Now, elected officials and advisory board members, typically what we're looking for is kind of a high level of communication from you folks, where you set reasonable expectations in the community. And then you set reasonable expectations in the community of what people can expect. And then you're using your position to make sure that you're exerting enough pressure on staff and other advisors to make sure they're delivering on those expectations. Now, this is a good time for me to talk about the towel rack. I got a towel rack at home. It's in a box. My wife wants me to hang it in the bathroom. I hate the idea. I think she's just about figured out that I'm never going to hang this towel rack. If I do hang the towel rack, she will be pleasantly surprised that I've done it, even though she's waited about 2 years for it. What I've done here is successfully manage my wife's expectations. All right. Important principle in public relations is we set expectations that we can meet or beat. So you do want to make sure that the expectations that you're setting of staff and others and expectations for the community, and particularly things around timelines, are grounded in reality and likely to be met. They're reasonable. They're likely to be met or beaten. Okay, now, if we're going to communicate quickly, it means that we're going to have to care about each other, care about being sensible, prevent surprises. There should be some clear protocols, roles, and responsibilities. As an advisory board, I think one discussion you should have from time to time is, where are we at? What have we decided? Who needs to know at this stage? Who's going to tell them? How are they going to tell them? When's it going to happen? And, you know, before you move on to the next item in agenda, looking after some of these basic communications aspects will be helpful to you. And it'll kind of get you in the culture where you're providing helpful information to the community. All right. Any questions on any of that? Because I've been rambling on for a bit. Let's move on to what you do if media call. All right. Now, you're on this board to serve. You're serving the public, but you're also leading. You're providing a certain amount of leadership, right? So when you get a media inquiry, there's a question I have for you, right? And reporters will call you. They may call you. Some of you have mentioned, is it Martin? You said you're retired now, but you're still busy. All right. Well, you're going to still be busy, and media is going to call you when you least expect it, and they're going to want something right away. Okay. So in that moment, are you serving a reporter that's asking a bunch of questions, or are you leading? What's more important to you? If you answer questions right away from a reporter, you're serving the reporter. Who's leading? The reporter's leading. All right. And if you want to provide good service to a reporter, by all means, knock yourself out. Most people in the situation you were in, when they think it through, would rather provide leadership. And what I mean by leadership in that is, you know, Ancient Aliens on the History Channel is in season 20, right? So this is a time where we want to think about, how do we make sure that there's good information out there on the street, that people's questions can be brought forward, reasonable information can be provided. Matt's used to being yelled at. I guarantee you, Matt feels a lot more comfortable when he's being yelled at over things that are real. Doesn't really just matter what a municipal government decides. People will yell at the municipal government, so we're comfortable with that, thick skins. But it is helpful if people are concerned about stuff that's actually real. The hardest thing is when people are concerned about stuff that isn't real. It's very time consuming and challenging. All right, so how do we make sure there's good information out there and that we're providing information in a helpful and responsible way? First thing we want you to do is recognize that good media relations is mostly planning, not delivering. So we provide people advice on how to answer questions and all that sort of business. We do that at the end, after they've considered about how to be sensible, right? I'm not here as a media consultant to make you quotable. That's easy. My interest is how do we make you sensible, right? Texas is easy. Switzerland is hard, right? How do we behave more like Switzerland? How do we achieve that? So one of the ways we do that is we slow things down and we make sure that we're interviewing the reporter first. A reporter that's come to you presumably has done a little bit of homework. It's fair and reasonable that you should do some homework before you go on the record to get back to them. So you're going to say to them, first of all, what's your deadline? What are you looking for? What's helpful to you? I would ask them questions like, how familiar are you with the project? Where are you calling me from? Toronto Star. My goodness, I don't remember the last time we saw Meaford in the Toronto Star. What has you calling us? What is it about this story that interests you? Am I the only other person you've spoken to? Have you spoken to anyone else? Well, you spoke to Martin. What did Martin have to say? What'd you think of that? I ask a lot of questions. I interview the reporter. Doesn't matter what the reporter says to me. I don't comment on anything the reporter said at this point. I'm just processing information. Now, you can do that, or you can defer completely to municipal staff to do that for you. And that'll look like, help me help you. Can you send me a quick email? I'm in my truck. You can tell me who you are and what you're looking for. It'll help us get you good information faster. You take that email, you fire it back to whoever the communications lead is going to be. Now, I'm not sure who would that be in Meaford? Kirsten, right. Now, does everybody have her cell phone already? No. Okay, so that's homework for you. Get her cell phone number, because these calls are going to come in at 8 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night, Saturday morning at, 10 a.m. They're not going to come through normal channels in 9 to 5. If you're getting media inquiries, they can come at you in strange places, strange times. We're going to get them to you no matter what you're 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Thank you for your service.
She's gonna kill me tomorrow. Thank you.
We eliminate surprises, right? It's the job we're in. So getting that information, setting reasonable expectations of when we'll get back to the reporter at a mutually agreeable time. I don't know if anybody watches Pawn Stars. I love it, but that looks a bit like this. Rick never says in Pawn Stars, I'll give you $50 for that. What he always says is, what do you want for it? And if they said, I want, $25 for it, he says, oh, I was thinking I would give you 10. So same thing with reporters. There's a bit of, it's like buying a car. How much time can you give us? It'd be great if you could give us 2 days. All right. 15 minutes. When are you really going to print? When do you really need this? Now, let's say you're walking out of one of these meetings. Do we have media that covers council meeting locally? Could be here. All right. So you've had one of these meetings. Reporter corners you in the hall or the parking lot, wants to have a chat. It's the same principle. Help me help you. I'm going to go to the washroom. I'm going to think about it. I want to see if I'm the best source. Maybe the chair is the one you should speak to right now. I should connect you with some of the engineers. Like, think about it. It's not a game of tag. Just because they've asked you for questions doesn't mean that you're the one that is on the spot. And even if I'm in a situation where I'm being stopped in a hallway, I'm going to take 10 or 15 minutes of quiet time by myself to clear my head and make sure I'm doing a good job of my responses. And it's reasonable. Any reporter that doesn't want to give you that isn't being reasonable, because a reporter who's not going to give you that amount of time isn't really interested in your thoughts. They're interested in your reactions. That's not fair and reasonable. Well thought out responses that are sensible, particularly when they're done well, should help a reporter write the story better. So you don't have to make apologies for carving out a little bit of time. All right, now, most people, you know, I'm picking on Marvin, but Marvin, sounds like you're still working on that house you got there. So you're putting up a new fence, you're busy. Reporters wants to talk to you. You'll be tempted to kind of think for about 5 minutes to gather your thoughts. And then you may find yourself talking to the reporter for about 20 minutes, half an hour. And then after that, you're going to lie awake wondering what's going to be in the paper tomorrow. You won't have a good sense of it. That's stressful. They're not paying you enough to be on this panel, so let's eliminate some of that stress that you shouldn't be carrying around. It is better to carve out half an hour, actually. Like if it's the same amount of time, it's better to carve out half an hour, think about what you think is important. They're only going to quote you once or twice. Whether you talk to them for 5 minutes or half an hour, they're only going to quote you once or twice. So what do you really want to see in the paper? What do you really want to see covered? Think that through. Think about how you make that strong, how to get that delivered. When you're done the interview, you'll have a much better sense of what you'll see in coverage, less stress, sounder sleeps. All right, now you're going to have after hours situations, so I want to address that. Typically, when you have to deal with something after hours, or some of the things you do on social media, it's really just a listening moment. Some people like the project, some people don't. I'm here to listen. We're going to have to make a decision. I want to make sure I fully understand perspectives. Some people may want to debate with you in the coffee shop. It's probably far too early a stage. Say, look, I'm not going to get it back and forth with you, but I do want to make sure I fully understand where you're coming from. Help me help you. Let me hear you out. Right? That perspective will be valuable to you in this room. All right. I want to talk about plain language a little bit. Any question on any of that in terms of process? Kirsten, she's probably got the most questions, everybody? No? Okay. Simple messages travel further and faster and better than complicated messaging. And you're going to see a lot of complicated messaging. Again, push back on the engineers. If somebody, you know, if I'm working on I've worked on a lot of toxic sites. Okay, where people like truly contaminated, scary sites. And they're trying to make them safe. And if the neighbors say to me, you know, is my kid going to get cancer because of the work you're doing? It doesn't make sense to respond with charts and graphs and data. We can show them that all that stuff exists. But what they really want to know is, you know, if my brother was going to move next door to this project and plant a vegetable garden, would I help him plant a vegetable garden, or would I talk him out of it? That's really what my brother wants to know. Is it safe to grow carrots? And all the technical people, we may have to lock them into a room for a very long time until they get their head around the question of, is it safe to grow carrots in this soil? But they're smart folks, and if they think about it enough, they will come up with a plain language answer. Now, often people refer to that as dumbing things down. It's not dumbing things down at all. It's quite the opposite. We need all their years of education, their commitment, their thoughts. We need to lock them in a room until they can do it. So it requires some effort. You'll hear lots of language like sustainable, resilient. What do these things really mean? If Martha drowned down the road, if we got to explain it to Martha down the road, it's probably not the right words, folks. Right? Think about speaking to people in Meaford in a way that makes sense for Meaford, and they'll believe you, they'll trust you more. The other thing that's going to happen is it's going to circulate through the community with more accuracy. So if we think of a game of telephone line like you were a kid, If we were to play that game right now and we want to have a good laugh about it, I would start over and I'd give David, a complicated sentence. And it would get butchered quickly and it would sound ridiculous over at this end. That's not what we want. We want messages and information that spreads through the community efficiently on its own. Plain language is going to do that far better. So how do we achieve that? I don't want to give you any homework, but this one may be helpful to you. Don't worry about the fine print here. If you go onto Microsoft Word, there is a tool in Microsoft Word. If you click on Help and ask for readability statistics, it will show you how to set up Microsoft Word so that when you do a spell check, you'll also get readability statistics and you'll see things like grade reading levels. Now, the Ontario government wants all information that goes to the public to come out at about a grade 5 or 6 reading level. That's hard to achieve. During the pandemic, all of their healthcare information, all their media materials coming out of the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Long-Term Care, were at a grade 17 or 18 reading level. Things like congregate settings. Things people didn't understand, quite frankly, and it's not helpful, right? So the grade reading level is how many years of education are required for the average person to follow it. Media looks for about grade 6 to 10. So when this is covered in the Globe and Mail, with all of its complexity, the reporter will cover the story at about a grade 9 or 10 reading level. The engineering reports that you're going to get are all going to be, like if they went to Guelph University, it's going to be grade 23, right? Feel free to push back to them a little bit. Anybody who really knows what they're talking about should be able to explain it at about a grade 10, 11, 12 reading level. Now, when you are communicating information, if you're in that sweet spot of about grade 6 to 10, a reporter will quote you. If you're beyond that, reporters will quote someone else who is more plain language. Who's going to be more plain language on this? People on Facebook who are furious. People on Facebook who are scared. Those are the people, they will have no trouble coming in at a grade 5 or 6 reading level because it's conversational, right? So spend some time thinking about how you can explain what's going on here. If you can explain it over a dinner table at Thanksgiving, you're good to go. That's what we're looking for. All right. So reporters will share, quote, and use stuff that's about a grade 5 to 10 reading level. It's about a high school level of education. They'll misquote, ignore, or rewrite, paraphrase anything that's greater than that. You don't want to be paraphrased. Most people, when they tell me I was quoted out of context or misquoted by a reporter, it's because their thoughts were presented in too complicated a way. And the reporter had, if they were going to use them, had to do some rewriting. We don't want that. Okay, let's do some planning for you. Any questions on any of that? Okay, there aren't a million questions you're going to get. There's only about 15 possible questions, and they tend to be the same types of questions all the time. I've given you this sheet in your handouts, and there's some boxes here, or some, there's like bullets there. These are the general core questions that you get from people. Can we trust you? Is it safe? What's the economic impact? What's it do to the environment? Have you done your homework? Have you done it in the past? Have you done all the right things in the past? Are you doing the right things now? Are you going to do the right things in the future? That's due diligence. Do you have the capacity? How do we know you're being held accountable? How do we know you're transparent? Is it fair? What's going to happen next? What's already happened? These are basic core questions that you're going to get. There's not that complicated. There's only about 15 possible questions. And on any given topic, no matter how complicated it is, there's only usually about 4 or 5 baskets that the questions come out of. And if we spend a little bit more time here tonight, we could figure out exactly what your baskets are. But, for COVID, they're health and safety, social economic impact, due diligence, plan and next steps, and fairness. If you have a good handle on those 5 baskets, you're a medical officer of health or a health official or someone who has to face difficult questions during a pandemic, you're good to go if you're truly prepared on those core topics. So you have time to figure out what these core topics are for this project and get your head around how you're going to talk about those things. Again, these are the usual suspects that come up. And again, I think you're probably looking at, you'll have lots of questions around trust and credibility. Now, you may be tempted to say, trust me, I've been in this town for 5 generations. Is that going to work? Trust me is a terrible message. If you have common sense, sensible things to say on all the baskets that matter, trust and credibility will fall into place. If you're short on a basket, trust and credibility will be eroded. They're not going to trust you just because they went to high school with you, right? They're going to trust you if you've got your head around the things that matter to them. All right. You want to think about how you want to be remembered? This process, right now, you think, oh, what are we supposed to say now? That's hard to come up with in the heat of the moment. But 5, 10 years from now, your work on this committee will be a faint memory in the community. How do you want to be remembered? I'm curious. How would you want to be thought of in terms of your work here? If 10 years from now, I'm telling the story of the work you did, how would you all want to be remembered? Anyone?
Favorably.
Favorably, okay. Favorably looks like how do you get favorably? I'm going to drill down a little bit further. We all want to be liked. What sort of things would you have to be known for pulling off to be thought of favorably 5 years from now? Productive, okay. Move the conversation forward. Practical, productive. What else?
We made a difference.
Made a difference. Okay, these are still kind of different. The difference could be bad. Gives a comet makes a difference when it hits the earth. What kind of difference?
Got the best deal.
Got a good deal. So negotiated with the community's interest at heart. That's financially, but also socially. All right. Looked after future generations. If you're going to do a good job of that, what other sorts of things? What kind of qualities and traits would you have to have? Sorry? Do the right thing. All right. Listen. Okay. Notice how now we're moving to things that are more tangible. So listening. What else? Willing to listen. Not just listen, not just hear, but also have your minds changed. Open-minded. What else?
We were good communicators.
Okay. Again, that could go both ways. A car salesman's a good communicator. What about caring? Do you want to be remembered for being caring? You probably do. Listening? Do you want to remember for being honest? Open? Transparent? Imagine if I met a neighbor just moved from Meaford and said, oh, I remembered all that. Those people, they were caring, careful, conscientious. They listened. They put in a lot of time. They volunteered a lot of hours. They fought for the community. And I think they did a good job for us. These are pretty simple things. But when you think about all those baskets, when you figure out what baskets matter in terms of what the subjects are and how you want to be remembered on each one of those baskets, it's going to come down to things like financially responsible. They did the homework. They read all the materials. They were caring. They advocated for the community. They were open. They were accessible. If you're remembered in these ways, trust will increase and you probably will land in the right place. Okay. Those simple words that I gave you, you can pull language like that together into a sentence or two, which provides positioning. Now, you'll have stuff that you're going to talk about. What I'm really talking about is positioning. We think of a process like this. If I give you all a cue card and I ask you at this point, what is the purpose of the advisory body? First of all, questions I have, would you be able to get it all on a single cue card? Not yet. And how consistent would the responses be from all of you? Would they be fairly well aligned or would they be all over the map? All right. Let's agree, I think you probably would agree, that if you could all explain exactly what you're doing, plain language, pretty crisply, and you all had a pretty strong shared sense of this, you're in a stronger position to advocate for the community. Because there's a clear positioning and a clear compass bearing and a clear direction for you. So when we're communicating what we're doing, having a good sense of that clarity and shared positioning is helpful. Now, putting all of this together, it's not just information that you provide to the public. You want to start to kind of frame out what your story is. You should be able to kind of explain what this body is, why you're on it, and why you're doing it. Who are you and why you're doing it? Should be able to do that in about a sentence or two. Each one of those baskets, you want to be able to address things like environment, finance, due diligence. You should be able to explain your position on each one of those also in a sentence or two. Over time, you would pull some examples and some numbers that explain the project to the community. And when you're answering a question of a reporter, if it's 680 News that calls you, unlikely, but if it's 680 News, they're only going to want 15 seconds. It's probably that positioning statement. If it's the Toronto Star, it's probably the positioning statement, the key messages, maybe an example or a number or two. If you're standing in front of a town hall meeting with a room full of people and you have a good map like this in your head, you can go all night long answering tough questions confidently because you've thought it through and you have a good sense of what the project is and what your story is. Now, you'll build this up over time if you make a point of building it up, right? It'll come to you if you just add and add and add as you go through the course of the project. All right, any questions on any of that? Okay. Strong messages, things that get quoted. Simple, unexpected, concrete, credible, inspire emotion, tell a story. The proof of this is, I don't know how much you're going to remember from today, but you remember that there was a cat on my street that was ripped in half by a coyote. It's simple, unexpected, concrete, credible, inspires emotion, tells a story. It's more likely to be remembered. So things that resonate with the public have this criteria. It's worth asking whether you want that. The story is already kind of interesting. Do you want the story to be like, do you want to set fire to a dumpster? This is how you would do it. If you want to have a calm, careful discussion, you would be also aware of this list, but you'd be a bit wary of it. Now, CAOs like Matt have an incredible skill. It's a reason how they kind of end up where they are. They're able to have a conversation with a reporter, make sure the information is well understood, but surprisingly, they're not quoted in the story. They're able to provide good, clear, conscientious information without being quotable. It's a skill. Now, mayors aren't going to settle for that. Mayors are going to they're going to say something lively. They're going to get quoted. You have to decide where you want to be. Do you want to be a notable public figure on this board or a helpful, conscientious member of this board? Do you want media calling you all the time or not, right? You want to think about how sort of memorable your messages are. Other things that are helpful, what you're doing and why you're doing it, colorful language, a few facts, a few examples, common sayings, these sorts of things can help explain a lot of complicated information in a way that's helpful to the public. Okay, any questions about any of that? I'm going to leave you the delivery part, and I'm particularly going to make an invitation. We haven't chosen a chair yet, am I correct?
Correct.
All right. So realistically, it's the chair who is most likely to have to be in a situation of actually carrying media interviews when that moment happens. I'm going to leave some of the techniques that we use for communicating information, conducting media interviews, but I'll make an invitation. If one of you is good enough to step forward and volunteer to be chair, I will volunteer some time with you over the phone to walk you through some of these things. All right. I want to move over to, I'm going to leave you with all that. And I'm going to go to, let's go to social media. Should we take a break, by the way? Or are we good?
What does everyone think? Would you like 5 minutes?
I'm probably another 20 minutes. Hammering through it. All right.
Okay, everybody agrees? Okay.
Show of hands. Let's wake you up a little bit. Who's on social media already? Show of hands. Are you on Facebook? Okay. Instagram. LinkedIn. Twitter, X, whatever that weird show is now. Okay. What am I missing? What about neighborhoods? Do you have neighborhoods in this area? No. TikTok. Okay, the Chinese are listening, so we want you off TikTok anyway. Okay. You're not big social media users, but some of you are there. Now, just because you're not on social media doesn't mean you won't be on social media when this starts up, right? You may see some things that give you a kind of emotional reaction on social media in the coming months and whatnot. It makes sense that you should have a personal social media plan at this point. So should your teenagers, by the way. My 17 and 19-year-old, they can get on social media once I see a social media plan. I want to know what they're going to do when it gets weird. I want to know how they're going to use it, why they're going to use it, why they're on it, and how they're using their time. I'll get into a little bit more about what the plan should look like in a minute, but first I'm going to give you some hope and fear. Courage. If you're going to be on social media, or quite frankly, even if you're going to be on this board, you need to have a little bit of courage. You need to recognize it does not really matter what you do in the current environment we're in. Somebody will yell at you. If Meaford decides to build a recreational facility, let's say they decide they're going to build pickleball courts. Someone will say, that's not diverse enough. It should be a cricket pitch. We'll solve that one and say, nope, we're going to do pickleball courts. And then somebody's going to say, well, how many? And 1 isn't enough. 2 is too expensive. All right. And then somebody, when you're building it, will come along and say, it should have been a baseball diamond all along. Right. So this is normal. It doesn't matter what direction you go in. There will be criticism coming at you, and you just need to recognize that is the case. All right. Now, if you can conduct yourself at a cocktail party, you can conduct yourself on social media. Cocktail party rules apply, although it's a very strange cocktail party, very large cocktail party where everybody's in it. But the way you would, if you think about how you would conduct yourself in a public setting like this, you will conduct yourself correctly in a social media setting. All right. Your personal plan. If you're going to be on it, I think it's worth kind of thinking about why are you on it? What are you hoping to achieve? How much time and energy do you want to put into it? Should you use your real name, a fake name? If you have any social media accounts that are under a fake name, I think you should let those go fallow and stick to your own name now. Right? You're essentially becoming a semi-public figure in this role, and having your name on it is going to make sure that you behave in a sensible manner. It's good quality control. What's the character and tone? Some people try to grow their social media following by being sarcastic. I guarantee you, if you use a strategy like that, the world will be sarcastic right back at you. You should, in conducting the work that you're doing, you should be thinking about the tone that you set. And that's particularly true over how you're using social media. Whatever tone you adopt will be reflected back to you. You're not too far down the road from Wasaga Beach. Wasaga Beach ran into some difficulty with social media in part because they took a very regulatory tone, and then they were kind of surprised when the neighborhood behaved like prison inmates. All right, we set the tone, and the tone that we want isn't regulatory. It's more inspirational, as you would be at a cocktail party. All right. What are you going to comment on social media? Are you going to comment on this a lot or never? It could vary from some of you. Like, what is the purpose of your social media account? And if you're going to use it as a tool to communicate what's happening here, you want to pay attention to what other sort of topics that you're posting on. Are they compatible, consistent? Some topics are perfect for Facebook, but they have no place on LinkedIn. Having some sense about why you're using it and the tone and the subject matter is important. All right. If you're going to use it a lot, you want to recognize that it's time consuming. There are some tools that are available to you. You should be able to explain your social media strategy in a few sentences, and then the tactics and individual things that you use to kind of make those things happen would lay out from that. So for instance, the strategy I might have is I'm going to be on Instagram. It's going to be entirely visual, just photographs. My tactic is I'm going to go out to get a camera that syncs up with my phone so that I can make that posting seamless. This last one, boundaries, is important. All right. So for instance, you may be tempted to drag staff into social media discussions. That's violating a boundary. You're probably pulling a person's personal social media account into the town square. You should stick to the processes by which information is available to this committee, right? You want to think about what some of those boundaries are. Okay. The tone that it's your call, right? It's your personal social media account, but generally speaking, what most people are looking for, if they're going to have a long-term presence on a situation like this, again, dinner party type persona on social media. In terms of the boundaries that you've got, there's the privacy of individuals. There's legal agreements. You need to make sure you fully understand the commitments of the parties involved. You folks, all of your meetings are open. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. From time to time, when folks move into closed meetings, often their inability to communicate sensibly around closed meetings creates problems that are bigger than whatever the subject matter of the meeting was. All right. So handle these sorts of moments very carefully. You want to make sure that you are advocating in a role that makes sense for the position you have and not going beyond it. So for instance, your decision-making role will be limited compared to a council, for instance. You don't want to confuse those roles. All right. I'm going to keep moving. I've got some examples there. I'm going to leave that for you. Issues. All right. What do we do with the people that are yelling at us? I'm giving you some links there for a deeper dive on this because I promised Martin I'd be 20 minutes. All right. So first things first, we're going to pick our battles and we need to recognize that most of them can be ignored. When somebody is really upset and you're not crazy about the way they're behaving, let's recognize that most bad behavior is driven by fear. So ask yourself, what are they concerned about? What are they afraid of? Where's this coming from? See if there's a real problem that could be fixed, should be fixed. You will not run into people who say to you on Facebook, oh my God, I didn't really think about that. You changed my mind. That was, I think about everything differently now. That's not going to happen. So we should stop chasing that. But there are moments where you can see things brewing on social media and recognize where you can take an action that improves the situation and makes a difference. All right. When people are upset at you or others, again, listen carefully to what they're upset about and concentrate on good service, not good debate. Planning ahead will be helpful to you. The more you think about what some of the newsworthy, notable elements you have and what you need to do to get prepared for that on social media, the longer your timelines are, the better in terms of being ahead of that stuff. I'm gonna just leave you with that one. There's going to be people in the community that are opinion leaders. You want to think about who some of those people are. Some of the people who are influential on social media locally. It makes sense to make sure that they're well informed. And I'm going to give an example of what I mean by this, and I'm surprised that it doesn't happen. In my municipality, I moderate a Facebook page for 8,000 people. There's almost no media in Mississauga. So people find out what happens in my neighborhood largely through Facebook. And yet no one from the city of Mississauga has ever reached out to me to say hello or to find out who I am or to give me basic information about what's happening at the city. That doesn't make a lot of sense. Typically in the past, governments and processes would spend time with editors or reporters and make sure they're informed. For social media, that rarely happens. So give some thought to who the people are in your neighborhood, who are on social media a lot and are influential, and start thinking about, what can we do to make sure that this person has a good, sensible, full understanding of what's happening. There's going to be tools that'll be made available to you. So for instance, you may have people complaining about all sorts of things. When they do, you want to direct them to processes that allow them to capture their input. So if the public is allowed to comment on things that they're seeing, those processes that allow for that content and getting them connected to that is going to be more helpful than just letting them fester. For the town of Meaford, often that's a service request, for instance. You've probably seen situations where people are complaining about the town online. It's a moment where a counselor should weigh in and say, I'm listening, I'm hearing all this, but just a reminder, if you want us to provide a service that you think isn't being provided, fill out this form so staff can connect on it and act on it. There should be reasonable rules and standards, and this is where I'm really going to ruin Kirsten's day, I think. Are there social media codes for Meaford? Codes of conduct? Okay, I had trouble finding them. We want them to be more obvious, and they should be obvious to everybody here, so that in these moments, typically the more front and center those guidelines are to people, the easier they are to kind of enforce. In the city of Mississauga, they're right under the city of Mississauga's about section. They're in plain language. They're really clear. So if there's issues in my neighborhood and the city takes action, nobody's surprised because it fits with, it's kind of like we warned you. All right. You live the values that you're trying to create through this process, a little bit day by day. And I would stress largely how you interact with one another is going to have a big bearing of how people see, the credibility of the panel, of the board, the process, the advisory body, and it will have a bearing on how people communicate your work and conduct their own behavior. All right, helpful language. Sometimes you may see things that you shake your head, but you don't have to agree with everything. Good comments here. Here's what we know so far. Here's a link to the best information we have. Haven't heard that before? I'm happy to look at it. I'll meet you for a coffee. Send me whatever documentation you want me to see. Lots of you here. Thanks for sharing. Consensus may be hard to find. Often when we have discussions on social media that are getting strange and toxic, just dial it back to make sure they understand you're listening is about all that really needs to happen in that moment. Last couple of things here to think about. You're not going to berate or argue or enforce decent behavior from people on social media. It's not going to happen. You have to inspire it. And one of the things I've learned from moderating pages that even when people are behaving terribly, they believe they are fighting the good fight. They believe they are doing the decent thing. And we can remind them of what calm, polite, decent Canadians look like, right? And how we behave. And you can inspire that behavior from surprisingly toxic people on social media. So again, being critical of people who are critical about you isn't going to get you where you need them to be, but you can inspire them. I'm going to give you an example that really sums up my whole approach to moderating a social media page. You will be aware that Georgian Bay often moves big rocks into places where they're really unhelpful to be. And you're not allowed to bring in heavy equipment without a whole bunch of approvals, right? You got to move a big rock. So I dig a hole beside the rock and I push it. and gravity moves it into the hole, and the waves lift it up again. And then I dig another hole and I push the rock into the hole. And over the course of about 3 weeks and a few storms, I can move a rock the size of this podium 15 feet that way to where I need it to be. This is how we make sure we get the results we're looking for on social media. Direct messages that you send, you need to recognize that everything that you give to people, everything you write down, everything you share, all the discussions that you have, can be quickly turned into a screen capture, and then there's social media posts. So all of it is public, all of it. All right. And the last thing is, when things are really heated, and if they get really heated, be good to one another, because we're finding that folks in government roles that are managing social media for government processes are requiring mental health support on par with police, fire, and paramedics. It is a rough world out there. We're gonna keep you may be busy 24/7.
The third time just looked at me like.
We need to recognize, and there's going to be moments where maybe we've all made a decision. It's like, you know what, we're not going to engage on that. We're going to sit on our hands and we're just going to let that blow over. That's fine, but you may find there are characters that are caught up in the middle of that, and they deserve to know that that's the plan and they're valued. All right. I've left you some additional information about different types of social media platforms and other things, but I'm just going to leave you to capture that stuff on your own. All right. Any questions on any of that?
Please go ahead, Harley.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Thanks, Brian. Just one question and one comment I'd like to make. Back on page 19, your number 2 squares, number 56 overall. There's the statement says good government should take priority over good debate. I wrote down beside that, good debate must come before good government.
Yeah, good debate. A lot of the debate on social media is not good debate. So what I'm saying is there is, launching that zinger that really sticks it to the person who's insulting you on social media. That may feel good, but typically on social media, if it feels good, it's probably not the right thing to do. And quite frankly, we see a lot of people wander into behavior in social media arguments. And those arguments take on tones and character that would never happen in a circle like this, where we have good debate. So good debate is part of good governance. A lot of the debate on social media is just bonkers. Right, so that's what we're referring to.
Thank you, and if I may.
Of course.
On page 17, your last bullet on in the last number 51 block, I found this kind of interesting when it talked about your actual boundaries don't comment on other municipal governments. It's rather ironical that some comments made by other municipal governments concerning the municipality of Meaford are maybe going to have an effect on this committee. And it's just, now I don't think you put that statement in because of, of our neighbors, but it just rings true to a degree in our debate that's going to go forward. And it's and now this is just one specific instance, but I guess maybe I've been guilty of this in the past, commenting on what other municipalities are doing, and maybe it's a bit of a wake-up call.
It never goes well. I mean, the simplest example of where we see this is often if there's a major emergency, media will look for somebody to comment. So for instance, if somebody, like, this is entirely hypothetical, but if let's say we had a major forest fire bearing down in Ontario City, I would fully expect that media that's frustrated at trying to get comments from the fire department that's dealing with the fire, what's an obvious place for them to go to? Fort McMurray. So if they were to contact the Fort McMurray Fire Department and ask them to weigh in on what do you think about the fire response that you're seeing in this Ontario city, I would expect the folks in Fort McMurray to have the good sense to say, the people on the ground in Ontario are the experts on this fire, and I'm going to defer to them. Right? So
Certainly, supportive comments, I think, are maybe a
Sure.
little more admissible than maybe the more general ones.
yeah, stick what's on your business card. It's what you know. And if it's not on your business card, then chances are there's somebody else has a business card that's more appropriate for the question.
Please go ahead, Doug.
In my life, I normally use a lot of expletives I won't hear, but that scared me. So how often should we be actually expecting that media might call us as members of a committee like this? Just because I know we're laughing about bugging Kirsten, but I don't want to. So what is an expectation that we should have as members of it?
Well, first of all, it's not bugging her. When you get that call, it's not bugging her. Sorry, but it's not. She's just gonna get a raise. So if she does a good job on this, honestly, like people who handle this well, get promoted. She's up to the task, right? So because these are the moments where we learn and grow. She's got a whole career ahead of her. This is not a bad process to get experience in. Trust me on this. Okay, so people often feel, oh, well, we're in a small community, so we're not going to get a lot of media coverage. We don't have a lot of media. I probably won't need this. I've heard this many times. I heard this with somebody from the Ontario Clean Water Agency about 5 months before Walkerton hit. It was Peter Harrison, who then became the lead recovery engineer at Walkerton, and he did 200 interviews in the first month and a half, live interviews on CNN. I mentioned Fort McMurray, January 2016. I worked with the fire department in Fort McMurray, and they told me nothing ever happens here. It was about 5 months later that the fires rolled through Fort McMurray. So I don't really know the answer to your question, how much media coverage will you get? I do know that part of the answer will depend on how well you work together with one another. Right? There will be some key moments that are legitimately newsworthy. And when you do get media coverage, I wouldn't be surprised if the coverage that you're getting is from places like the Narwhal magazine, which is a national magazine, TV Ontario's The Agenda, Globe and Mail. Those are the ones I would expect the most, quite frankly. So that's probably a half dozen potentially. And that's on top of whatever you would generate locally. Barrie Media, One Sound Media, London Free Press. So you will have some moments where you'll get some coverage. And sometimes having long gaps in between those moments is actually challenging in its own way, because we kind of get lulled into a submission that we don't have to think about this. And then it's a Globe and Mail that you're dealing with.
Brian, I wonder if you could speak a little bit to situations that happen to us on council, during a meeting. There may not be media in the room, but they're listening.
Mhm.
And the next day I'll get a call and somebody will say, I heard you on the radio, because they're going to pick out quotes from the meeting. Is there anything we should know or be aware of, recognizing that that's going to happen?
Again, it can surprise you, and you just you need to know that everything that you say during these open processes can be turned into a soundbite. It's all fair game. They don't really need to tell you they're covering. They can pull all of that. And I would say that typically, again, they're not doing a research assignment when they're covering you. It's not like they're writing an essay. They're going to be looking for something that's interesting. So you can have a really well-focused professional meeting for 3 hours, but there's one weak moment, and it's like somebody's introduced a puppy in the room. That's what's going to be the quote, right? And that is what it is.
Thank you. And I appreciate that, Brian. And I think as well, I'm very grateful for the advice for speaking with media, but those moments when you get caught on the main street or at the grocery store, when you don't have that 5 minutes to collect your thoughts, would you suggest we say we'll get back to that individual, or to just to try to say something as briefly as possible? What's the best approach?
I think the most important one is to say, I want to hear you out. I'm listening. And honestly, I mean, another thing that we worked on for a year of my life that was an interesting one was education funding in Ontario when it was the hottest issue in Ontario. For 8 months, we toured around the province and we listened to furiously angry people. And for 8 months, all we said was, we're here to listen aggressively. No one will be turned away. We want to understand what everybody has to say. And then we went away for a period of about 3 weeks. The proposals on the matter were formulated. It was a very crisp media moment to roll out that information to the public. But, 90% of that project was merely listening to what people had to say. And in part, what people are going to look, when you're listening to what people have to say, you're going to recognize that this is a moment. It's like, I have to connect them with this information. I need to connect them with that information. They're going to find this element interesting. And then really just kind of being almost like an air traffic controller that helps people get to the information that they need and have the conversations with the right people. Most of the time, that's what you should be thinking about. I think when you're in a coffee shop, if you're jumping to debate stage, you're way, way too early. You need to hear what everybody has to say, process all the information, and then there'll be a moment where you're making decisions.
Matt?
Thanks, Shelley. I think we all know that this is something that's had more media coverage than most things in the municipality, though we have had a number of incidents over the last couple of years where we've had some, at least provincial feedback. And I've certainly talked to folks from the Narwhal and from CBC and from Global about this over the last few months. The bit that I think I just want to add to Brian's amazing advice is that nobody sat around this table is expected to talk to the media. So if you get we're not publishing any of your contact details, but it's amazing how they can find them. But if you get a phone call, my encouragement to you all is to say, thank you. Here's Matt, or here's Shirley, and then we can help deal with that. One of the other things that we will be doing, and this is something that will be iterative as we go through this process, is we'll be producing fairly regular sort of commonly asked questions documents, so that hopefully once the committee's made some decisions or made some recommendations, we can at least help you with some standard words that you might want to use in the public, but you might want to use if you do get a call from the Meaford Independent or from CTV Barrie or something like that. But a lot of the time it will be, let's find the right person to speak to whatever the media outlet is. If it's specifically about the committee, it could well be the committee chair, whoever that ends up being. If it's a really technical thing about the project, it may well be somebody like me. If it's something more political about the municipality's decisions, then it's probably likely to be the mayor, even though the mayor's not sat around this table. So I think there's lots of different avenues here. Nobody is going to be expected to deal with this, but it's good information to have, I think.
Yes, Adam.
Just a recommendation, could we get just something the size of a business card that has common answers and the contact number that we should be sending media to? Something we can keep in our wallet, in our phone, in whatever. So that can be an easy thing to pull out. Thank you.
Yeah, good thought.
Yeah,
Yes.
the card you have in the folder is also double-sided. You'll see it in there. And it's also designed to be kind of like a Coles Notes version of the Coles Notes version that you keep in the truck.
You'd like a phone call.
I get them anyway.
Linda, you have a question.
There we go. Okay. This might be a little bit of a U-turn from what we were talking about before, but I was looking on the back and you sort of went through different like social media platforms. And I don't really know how this committee plans on using them to our advantage yet, but I was sort of wondering, since this is such a serious topic, I guess, should we be kind of considering maybe steering away from those more informal social media sources? Is there a worry of maybe not necessarily the information we're communicating being insensitive, but the platform we're using being insensitive? Is that a worry, or is that something that we can not be as concerned with?
Okay, so this is a really important question. It's a good one. Glad you raised it. I should have thought about it. typically for a government, what we want to do is move social media discussions into a forum that can be tracked and followed and recorded. So that's email, websites, phone systems. Often when you call a government, they say your call may be recorded. That's probably, it is being recorded, right? So they need to let you know. Engaging people on a social media platform on this topic, I would limit that. I would use social media to make them aware of other engagement processes that are available to them, like a website, like meetings, like a feed, right? And any of those platforms would make sense. What I'd also like to think about is if you're, where's the nearest big arena? Is it in Meaford, or we got to go to Owen Sound?
Meaford.
Meaford. Okay, so if you're having like things like say we're in a hockey tournament in town and the rink's busy, if we want to use social media to get everybody in the arena, then we have to use multiple platforms, right? I can get mom through Instagram and Facebook and probably LinkedIn. I can get dad through probably maybe Facebook and maybe X. I'm not going to get a hold of grandpa. I can get a hold of grandma on Facebook, and I got to go to TikTok to get the kids on the ice, right? So we will take more of a demographic view of how we reach everybody that's in the building. But once we've reached them, we want to actually feed them into processes where governments are in a responsible position to maintain the quality of the conversation, because we don't want to lead that up to social media platforms with people's data and conversations with government entities.
Thank you. Anything further for Brian? Then I want to thank you so much, Brian, for being with us tonight. And I assure you, we will each remember something more than the coyote and the cat story.
Look after your cats.
Exactly. Thank you. And Kirsten, I just want to know that you will come back to work tomorrow. Yes. Maybe. Okay. Coming back to the agenda, the meeting schedule was next. I hope everyone has had a chance to look at those dates. And I believe we've agreed that 5 o'clock will be the time. And I think I'm quite safe in saying that as we go forward. Oh, sorry.
Notes. HTML.
Oh, my goodness. Okay. Apparently I touched something. Sorry about that. Moving forward, this has been a long meeting, and I really thank you all for your patience tonight and for your consideration of everything that's been shared with us. I think it's really important as we begin the work ahead of us that we have this training and this knowledge. But I do believe going forward, the meetings will not be quite as long, but they will begin at 5 o'clock, and we will meet every month, and we'll look forward to seeing everyone back in June. And so that's kind of all I had to say about the meeting schedule. At this
Sorry,
point,
Shirley, can I just
Matt, of course.
jump in for 2 minutes? Because I just wanted to give folks a bit of a plan about what the next one is, because I'm very aware that today has been sitting, listening, and you guys want to talk. At the next meeting, we will do the election of chair and vice chair. And Nigel has very kindly said that if anybody is interested in being the chair, he will very happily chat to anybody over the next month before that meeting. So if you'd like that, please get in touch with Kirsten or I, and we can help sort of facilitate some of that as well. We do have one more training activity that will be at the next meeting. Nigel mentioned our Integrity Commissioner, Jeff Abrams. He will be here just to talk a little bit about codes of conduct and conflict of interest. My version of the code of conduct presentation is be a decent human being to each other. He will go into it in slightly more detail than that, but he'll be here to do that. But then my hope is for the remainder of that session, as Shirley said, I don't think it'll be as long as a meeting. It'll be kind of a session for you all to talk to each other and for us to start identifying what information the committee wants. So we might even, it's what are the questions that we want to ask? What are the issues that the people have got concerns about? So that then folks like Kirsten and I and our Ainley team can start going away and planning how to bring some of those conversations back to this group, because we want to have those conversations. We've got to kind of identify them first. So just wanted to send you away today knowing that next time there will be some good opportunity for conversation between you, but also maybe to put your thinking caps on a little bit about what are that sort of list of top 10 things you care about for this project, and we can start building that together and identifying which are the most important ones to focus on first. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that, Matt. Committee inquiries is next on the agenda. Are there any questions at all that anyone has further to what's been discussed? Martin?
Who is coordinating absence reports? Like I looked at the upcoming dates here for the meetings, and I noticed that there's one day where I definitely can't be here because I'm in England at that time. So who do we report that to, and who can make sure that we have enough people here at the same time?
Absolutely. If you can report that to Kirsten and, give her as much notice as you can, and then she can always verify that there will be quorum for a meeting. Okay. Any other questions? The next point on the agenda just deals with communications. This committee doesn't have any correspondence today, but that may happen at our next meeting. And if we do, the correspondence will be part of the agenda. You'll have that ahead of time, and we can pull it and discuss it at the meeting if you wish. We've established the date of the next meeting, June 13th at 5 o'clock back here in Chambers. And the last motion of the evening is adjournment. So with that, I will call the meeting adjourned at 8:25. Thank you all so much for being here and for your attention tonight.